Chapter 17:15. The morning sun shone on his body, covering him with a layer of fluffy balls of light that danced on his hair, shoulders, and sleeves. The light was a little dazzling, and his entire person had merged into the circle of light. His appearance and expression could not be seen clearly, but with so many years of interaction, there was no need to look to know that his face was rippling with an infuriating smile. She never thought that he wouldn't leave and would stay until now. But why did he stay? She didn't want to delve into it and didn't want to know. Tao Tao looked away. The bamboo forest was the only way out of the valley, so she continued to walk forward. She slowly walked closer. Even if she didn't look at him, she couldn't help but see him from the corner of her eyes. As she got closer, the light slowly faded and she could clearly see his expression. A gentleman like jade, hair like ink, and a smile like the spring breeze. But she knew better than anyone that the owner of the skin was a complete evildoer. The moment she appeared in the bamboo forest, he had already seen her. She was still the same as half a year ago, but because he was busy talking to her yesterday, he didn't notice that she had lost quite a bit of weight. Her eyes were already big, but with her cheeks missing, it made her eyes seem even bigger. They were moist and made people want to take pity on her. He liked her past appearance even more. Her cheeks were chubby and soft when he pinched them. Thinking like this, he was a bit fascinated. He only came back to his senses when she walked in front of him. "Morning." His enthusiastic greeting was met with the other party brushing past him as if he was nothing but air. He took back his hand and rubbed his chin. There wasn't any disappointment on his face as he followed her footsteps. Looking at the basket on her shoulder, he continued, "Have you eaten? Are you going out to pick herbs?" Tao Tao ignored him and continued to walk forward. Not getting a response, Higashio Motetsu wasn't angry. He reached out to take her basket. "I'll help you carry it." Tao Tao took a step to the side, increasing the distance between them. She pursed her lips and continued to walk. Looking at his empty hand, he shrugged his shoulders and continued to follow her. Out of the bamboo forest, seeing that the person behind her was still persistently following her, Tao Tao's patience was reaching its limit. She thought that a proud person like him would be so angry that he would leave after being humiliated one after another. She didn't expect him to still be so persistent. She stopped and turned to look at him. She said impatiently, "Why are you following me?" Seeing that her mood had changed and that she no longer treated him as a stranger or heir, Higashio Motetsu was delighted, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. He tapped the folding fan in his hand, frivolous smile. "I'm not following you. I'm just enjoying the scenery." And coincidentally, we're both test walkings. Uffs. The corner of Tao Tao's eyes twitched slightly. This person had been looking around since the beginning, as if he was really enjoying the scenery. She was in no position to say anything. After thinking for a while, she said, "In that case, young Master Dongting, please go first. I want to rest." She stood to the side and waited for him to go first. Then she would choose the opposite direction. However, there were policies and countermeasures. If she didn't leave, he wouldn't leave either. He even fanned himself and looked around. Those who didn't know the inside story would think that he was a rich young master on a scenic tour. The scene lasted for a while. Tao Tao's eyes turned cold. She didn't want to waste time with him anymore. She tightened the basket on her shoulder, gathered her inner energy, and flew forward using her qinggong. However, she heard the sound of clothes fluttering behind her. She turned around and saw the evildoer following her leisurely. She secretly gritted her teeth. This person's martial arts were much higher than hers. It was impossible for him to escape using qinggong. She floated to the ground and turned to look at him coldly. "What are you trying to do?" "I'm not trying to do anything." "Then don't follow me." Perhaps it was the coldness in her eyes that made his heart tremble. Higashio Motetsu closed his folding fan and looked at her with his hands behind his back. "Didn't you follow me like this in the past? Could it be that only officials are allowed to set fires and commoners aren't allowed to light lamps?" When he said this, he didn't have any other meaning, but it was very harsh in her ears. It was as if he was reminding her of her shameless past. Her face turned red and she flew into a rage out of humiliation. "All right, as you wish. Just treat it as me paying you back." After she said this, she didn't care if he was still following behind her. She walked forward in large strides and didn't look back. He could hear her gritting her teeth and couldn't help rubbing his nose. He didn't want to make her angry, so how did he end up making a fool of himself? Thinking of the time when he insisted on returning to the capital, she was afraid that his injuries would relapse. She also followed him like this. She couldn't chase him away or scolded him. Thinking about her current situation, wasn't he doing what she did in the past? Right now, she was just like him in the past. She was impatient and very irritated. Higashio Motetsu, who had been given the cold shoulder, couldn't help sighing in his heart. It really was retribution. But even so, he wasn't willing to stop and continued to follow the person in front of him. Because he knew that if he left like this, he wouldn't be able to obtain her forgiveness in this lifetime. At this time, he suddenly understood that in the past, when she chased him like this, her heart had suffered a lot of grievances, helplessness, and expectations. Moreover, she was still a girl. He couldn't help scolding himself. There was a rogue following behind her. Although she wanted to ignore him, she couldn't ignore him. When she reached a mountain where she used to pick herbs, she was familiar with the path and picked 1 or 2 herbs. She didn't know what the person behind her was doing, but the sound of rustling clothes brushing through the grass could be heard from far away. Here. She didn't want to turn around, but a pair of slender white fingers reached out in front of her with several stalks of grass in his palm. She frowned as she looked at him, not understanding what he wanted to do. Meeting her gaze, Higashio Motetsu gave an uncomfortable cough and said, "I just saw these stalks and they looked like the ones you just picked." Hearing this, Tao Tao looked at the grass in his hands seriously. To be exact, it was a weed. "You're wrong. That's not 7-star grass, nor is it a medicinal herb." Higashio Motetsu was stunned when he heard this. His gaze swept over the 7-star grass in her basket. Although they looked similar, upon closer inspection, there were differences. For example, the leaves of the 7-star grass were serrated, while his were rounded. Suddenly, the Moon Palace sect master, who had always prided herself on being omnipotent, wished she could become transparent under the sun. In all her life, she had never been so embarrassed. Seeing his face slightly flushed and his eyes drifting, although she had already decided to let go of her feelings for him, she still couldn't help but want to laugh. March, the end of winter, the beginning of spring. All living things came back to life, and hibernation was lifted. Under the grass, a dark green snake was disturbed from its sleep and slowly approached the two of them. She suppressed her laughter and coldly said, "Go, don't follow me anymore." At this moment, the person holding the nameless weed suddenly pounced on her. "Be careful." Chapter 17:16. Before Tao Tao could understand what was going on, she was pulled over and thrown to the side. The two of them fell down heavily. Fortunately, there was a thick layer of grass underneath them. Otherwise, their internal organs would have been displaced by the fall. When she regained her senses from the darkness, her entire body was still in his embrace. Only then did she remember that when he had pounced on her, he had directly pulled her into his embrace and then turned his body to protect her. In her daze, she seemed to have heard him muffled a groan. Therefore, she was now lying in his arms in a very ambiguous position. This situation made her feel at a loss. She placed both her hands on his chest and wanted to get up, but the strength of his grip on her waist made her involuntarily bounce back. She flew into a rage out of humiliation and pushed him. "Hey, let go of me." Ever since they had fallen down, he had been carefully protecting her to prevent her from getting hurt. Now that he saw that her face was rosy and she still had the energy to throw a tantrum, there shouldn't be any problem. He curved his lips but didn't let go. He freed his other hand and raised it to stroke the stray hair on her forehead that had been blown by the wind. He said with a smile, "We haven't had a proper conversation since yesterday. I think this is pretty good. At least it's a good way to talk." Was he hinting at her ignoring him? Tao Tao pursed her lips. This person had the nerve to say that. She had clearly drawn the line between them and said that she wouldn't see him again. What was he like now? Back then, no matter how much she hinted at him, he didn't respond. Now that she had turned around and left, why did he come over? This was really boring, okay? She felt very tired. Even hearing his voice made her feel tired. She lowered her eyes to look at him. Her eyes were like a pool of stagnant water without ripples. Higashio Motetsu met her eyes and was slightly stunned. The smile on his lips slowly disappeared and he couldn't help but loosen his grip on her waist. Higashio Motetsu, I really don't want to see you again, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. Why can't you understand? Or are you deliberately acting dumb? Do you think it's interesting for us to be like this? After she finished speaking, she placed her hands on the ground and flipped over. After standing still, she looked down at him condescendingly. Her tone was very indifferent. He had never seen such an unreasonable side of her. Ever since they had met, she had always had a smile on her face. Even if she had angered him, she would always beg for mercy with a smile, as if she had never been worried. This side of her was very unfamiliar, and it made him flustered. He moved his fingers and frowned slightly. In the end, he maintained his previous posture and smiled evilly. All right, since you don't want to see me now, then leave. I'll look for you again when you've calmed down. Tao Tao felt as if she had used all her strength to hit Cotton, and there was no effect at all. She was a little annoyed, but when she saw the smile in his eyes, it was like a whirlpool that could inadvertently suck people in and drown them in his beautiful peach forest. She pursed her lips and looked away, not wanting to argue with him. Otherwise, she would be implicated again. She snorted softly, picked up the basket that had fallen on the ground, and turned to leave in large strides. Seeing her turn and leave without hesitation, Higashio Motetsu helplessly smiled bitterly. At this moment, the poison that he had suppressed with his inner energy had completely erupted. His cheeks were pale white, and his lips were purplish-green. He scanned his surroundings. The culprit had already disappeared. He snorted coldly, feeling weak all over. He wanted to stand up, but he could not. It seemed that he had to call Zimo. He struggled to reach into his chest, wanting to take out the signal strip. At this moment, a black shadow covered him. He raised his eyebrows and looked up. It was Tao Tao who had returned. The corner of his mouth raised. Before he could be happy, he remembered his current situation. He coughed lightly and said to her, "Why are you back? Can't bear to part with me?" The person in front of him looked at him with a sullen face. He continued to smile and said, "Or did you drop something? What are you doing lying here?" Higashio Motetsu was slightly startled. Didn't he just go along with her wishes and not follow her? Why was she so angry? "I'm sunbathing. The weather is not bad. It's suitable for me to catch up on my sleep." Looking at those purplish lips opening and closing, her entire body emitted a cold aura. Even at this time, he was still thinking about his elegance. Stubborn duck. She had already completely ignored him. She squatted down, lifted his hand, and examined it. "Yo, why did you suddenly throw yourself into this young master's arms? So enthusiastic?" Looking at the person who pulled up his sleeve, Higashio Motetsu could not help but tease with a smile. Tao Tao glared at him. "Shut up." Higashio Motetsu rubbed his nose and obediently stopped talking. The angry little demoness was too scary. It was not the hand. After she finished examining it, she remembered that when he pounced on her, he seemed to have changed his body. She promptly decided to pull up his trouser leg. Seeing her actions, Higashio Motetsu immediately reached out to pull down his clothes, but was shocked by her sharp gaze. "If you move again, I won't care about you anymore." This time he finally stopped. Tao Tao snorted, then pulled up his right trouser leg. A grape-sized purplish-black wound was exposed to the air. Her face tightened. It looked like the poison was very strong. Just now, he had already sealed her acupoints to prevent the poison from spreading further. She promptly pulled out the dagger on his calf, untied 2 strips of cloth, and tied them 3 inches above the wound. She lowered her head and said to him, "I'll release the poison for you. It'll hurt a little, so bear with it." Higashio Motetsu looked at her serious side profile. A few naughty strands of hair fell by her ears, like willow branches fluttering in the wind. The white skin on her neck extended downwards until it was covered by her collar, and he could not explore any further. Those ink-black eyes stared at the wound without blinking. There was a faint light in her eyes, and her red lips were slightly pursed with a serious expression. He had never realized before that her serious appearance could be so seductive. It made people want to reach out and touch her. He had just moved his fingers when the snake poison numbed his limbs. It was a little strenuous. Only then did he regain his senses and reply in a low voice, "It's fine. I'm not afraid of pain." Even if he was afraid of pain, she had to let him bleed. She made a cut on the black and swollen area, and soon, black blood flowed out with a fishy smell. It dripped onto the grass, and the grass quickly withered. Only when the black blood turned into a normal red color did she casually wipe the sweat off her face. She helped him stop the bleeding as she said, "You're lucky to have met me. Tao Tao, don't say one thing and mean another. To be honest, you still care about me, right?" Tao Tao stood up. Just as she was about to find some herbs to help him clean up the remaining poison, she suddenly heard his gentle smile. Her back stiffened, and then she raised her head to meet that pair of dazzling eyes that were dyed gold by the sunlight. She pursed her lips and said softly, "Don't misunderstand. Even if it's a dog, you'll still have feelings for it after 3 years." Chapter 17:17. Even if it was a dog, he would still have feelings for it after raising it for 3 years. Her words were like a cold winter wind that instantly extinguished the light in his eyes. The brightness faded away, leaving behind only darkness. Tao Tao lowered her eyes and didn't look at him, afraid that her heart would soften. She turned her back to him and said, "I'm going to find some herbs. Don't move." With that, she quickly left, her footsteps disorderly. Back then, she had clearly received a lot of cold words from him. Although later on, she was thick-skinned and he no longer used words to drive her away. No matter how thick-skinned she was still a girl. She had only used the excuse of liking him to support herself and not leave because of his embarrassment. Now, she was merely returning the cold treatment she had received back to him. However, she didn't feel the slightest bit of happiness or pleasure from venting her anger. Instead, her mood became even worse. It was as if she had hurt the enemy while losing 800 of her own men. She curled her lips in self-mockery and walked forward, facing the sun. The light pierced her eyes and made them a little wet. Higashio Motetsu, who had been left behind by her, watched as she walked away step by step. His eyes were a little dim. He couldn't help but recall how she had chased after him in the beginning. In order to drive her away, he had said many hurtful words. He hadn't expected that after going around in circles, retribution would come true on him. "Palace Lord, are you very sad?" Xuanxi Zimo, who had disappeared early in the morning, only dared to stealthily appear after secretly watching for half a day and taking advantage of Tao Tao's absence. Being spoken to like this by the woman he loved definitely didn't feel good. Xuanxi Zimo sympathized with his palace lord very much. However, if he hadn't treated Miss Tao Tao this way back then, he wouldn't have shot himself in the foot now. He chuckled softly and shook his head. His smile was bitter, but it was also a little lighter. He was more or less disappointed, but there was nothing he could do about it. Who asked him to dig a hole for himself? No matter what, he had to kneel down and fill it up. Higashio Motetsu's helpless smile, in Xuanxi Zimo's eyes, was like an abandoned little gentleman dejected. He hurriedly comforted him. "Palace Lord, don't be sad. Miss Tao Tao must have said those words out of anger. You just have to coax her." Higashio Motetsu chuckled when he heard this, and his eyes lit up again. "Do you think your palace master is so fragile? A few words were like 1,000 arrows piercing through the heart? You're thinking too much. If he gave up just like that, how could he find a wife? Wasn't it just being scolded like a dog by his future wife? It was already much better than being worse than a dog. He was not the kind of person who cared so much about his reputation. Even if he cared about his reputation, he would not be able to win his wife's favor." Xuanxi Zimo looked at the palace lord's sinister smile and gulped. He couldn't help but take a step back. The palace lord couldn't have been provoked by Miss Tao Tao, could he? At this moment, a figure appeared on the hillside in the distance. Higashio Motetsu immediately looked at the people around him. "Get lost. If you're discovered, you'll have to go to the northern lands and show me your weapon." The northern lands were desolate and uninhabited. Even birds wouldn't lay eggs there. He wasn't going. Xuanxi Zimo couldn't be bothered to reply. 3 steps turned into 2, and he disappeared. Tao Tao walked back to him and looked around. Was Zimo here just now? Higashio Motetsu cursed in his heart. This guy was so slow, but he was still seen. He was afraid that she would send someone back to take him away, so he immediately said, "You saw wrongly. It was a bear that passed by just now." Tao Tao didn't think too much about his words. In any case, this person always spoke half-truths and half-lies. Not a single word of truth. She bent down to check his wound and found that it was no longer bleeding. She turned around and took out the medicinal herbs from the basket on her back. She crushed them in her palm, then stuck them on his wound. The snake's venom is a little overbearing. Although I've basically released it for you, there's still some residual poison left in your body. I don't have the corresponding antidote on me right now, so I'll use the medicinal herbs to clean up part of it. When you go back, you can get someone to prescribe some medicine for you. Once you take it, it'll be completely eradicated. She said this to him as she applied the medicine, not paying attention to his expression at the moment. Higashio Motetsu looked at her gently, his tone still frivolous. "You saved my life again. It seems that I'll owe you a favor again. How do you want me to repay you? How about giving myself to you?" Hearing this, Tao Tao's fingers tightened, and she heard him groan. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, but when she looked up at him again, they were even again. She looked at him coldly. "If it wasn't for you just now, the person who would have been poisoned would have been me. So you saved my life, and I saved yours. We don't owe each other anything." With that, she stood up, grabbed the basket on her back, and prepared to leave. "Where are you going?" Higashio Motetsu looked up at her. "Since we don't owe each other anything, why should I tell you?" With that, she turned to continue walking. However, she had just taken a step when she realized that she couldn't go any further. She turned back and saw that her basket was grabbed by him. "What are you doing?" She wanted to pull it back, but when she saw his overly pale face, she didn't move. He lifted his chin slightly and said righteously, "Didn't you say that I saved your life? But now you're going to abandon your savior in the wilderness? This is the wilderness. What if I meet wolves, tigers, and leopards? What's the difference between this and biting the hand that feeds you? You're the palace lord of the Moon Palace. Are you afraid that no one will come to fetch you? What's the point of pestering me?" Tao Tao knew that she was in the wrong, but she didn't want him to gain the upper hand. Hearing this, his expression turned helpless. "I didn't bring anyone out this time. Who would believe you? Wasn't the person she saw just now Zimo?" He shrugged. "I can't help it if you don't believe me. Even if I'm lucky enough not to meet any ferocious beasts, I don't have any medicine to clear the remaining poison." Tao Tao snorted, expressing her disdain. "Your moon palace has so many medicinal herbs. Are you afraid that you can't cure a mere snake's poison?" He looked at her from head to toe and said with a doubtful tone, "That's hard to say. To people from the Devil's Valley, poison is a piece of cake. Who knows if the people in my sect can cure it? Can't you help me to the end? Or is it not like what you said, that we don't owe each other anything, but you want me to fend for myself? What's the difference between biting the hand that feeds you and biting the hand that feeds you?" As he spoke, he went back to the original point. Tao Tao was going crazy in her heart. She wanted to pull out a bunch of grass and stuff his mouth. She had been by his side for 3 years. She had already experienced his silver tongue. He could turn black into white and reverse right and wrong. Now, no matter how much she didn't want to have anything to do with him, she couldn't win against him. In the end, she could only accept her fate and squat down. She reached out and put her hand on his arm to help him up. "I really have to hand it to you. Let's go. It's been hard on you. I'm quite embarrassed." A certain someone was still pretending to be obedient. Tao Tao rolled her eyes at the sky. The sooner this person was cured, the sooner he could be sent away. In a place where she couldn't see, a certain someone's lips curled up and he smiled very proudly. Chapter 17-18. "Don't lean on me, it's very heavy." She clenched her teeth and supported him. How could she have known that his entire weight was on her? She staggered 2 steps and almost touched the ground with him. I don't have any strength, please bear with me. Higashio Motetsu helplessly apologized, but it didn't sound sincere at all. Tao Tao didn't want to pay attention to him. This person was the type that the more you talked to him, the more he jumped around. As if he saw through her thoughts, Higashio Motetsu curved his lips. He wrapped his arms around her waist and leaned his head on her shoulder. Her soft body and her hair had a faint scent of grass. It really made people unable to let go and couldn't help hugging her tighter. You bastard! Take your hands off me! Her face was slightly red, but it was unknown if it was because of anger or embarrassment. I don't have any strength. Let me lean on you so that I can recover my strength. I can also force myself to walk a few steps and relieve some pressure for you. He lied through his teeth. Really? How could a person without any strength hug her so tightly? Trying to trick a 3-year-old child. But she knew that she couldn't win against him. This person's ability to act shamelessly was something that even a horse couldn't compare to. Tao Tao no longer talked to him. She was thinking about something. Bringing him back to the Devil's Valley was impossible. If her master knew that he was the person that she wanted to follow no matter what, she would immediately release those poisonous scorpions, insects, and snakes to take his life. She walked while thinking. She remembered that there was a small cave nearby where they could temporarily rest. She looked around and found the location. Then she carried him and dragged him there. When they arrived at the cave, Higashio Motetsu knew that he had already taken advantage of her and couldn't provoke her anymore. Otherwise, she would really throw him here in a fit of anger. So he straightforwardly let go of her and watched her busying herself in the cave. His gaze moved away and looked at the cave. The cave wasn't big, but it could accommodate 4 or 5 people. His gaze returned to her body. She skillfully used a broom made of grass to sweep the dust. Although she didn't deliberately look at him, she could clearly feel his gaze on her. She felt very uncomfortable. After hurriedly cleaning up, she turned around and stood in front of him. It's almost noon. I'll get you something to eat. She didn't wait for him to respond and walked out of the cave. Looking at her energetic figure, Higashio Motetsu smiled. Since she was no longer in front of him, he did not force himself to hold on any longer. The aftereffects of the poison began to show. Exhaustion colored his eyes, and his eyelids became heavy. Thus he closed his eyes. After walking out of the cave, Tao Tao scolded himself in hindsight. Why didn't he learn his lesson? After being coaxed by him, he forgot what he had done. She pursed her lips and told herself again that she could not repeat the same mistake. No matter how shameless this person was, no matter how much he pestered her, she could not be bewitched by him. Was the lesson not enough? The waves in her heart quickly calmed down. Only then did she walk out to look for food. When she came back, a stick of incense's worth of time had already passed. She walked into the cave and saw his defenseless sleeping face. He had always been insufferably arrogant. When he smiled, he could turn all living things upside down. When he was angry, a storm would come. But this kind of defenseless appearance was rarely seen by normal people. She was lucky enough to see it several times when she sneaked into his room. Although she was chased out by him in the end. This was the first time he took the initiative to expose himself in front of her. She was slightly stunned, but she quickly came back to her senses. She softened her steps and put down the berries. Then she found a place to sit down. Although her movements were very light, with his strong internal energy, he should have noticed it easily. Why hadn't he woken up yet? She couldn't help looking over. The sunlight shined in from outside the cave and fell on his body. His normally charming face had lost its blood color and seemed a bit transparent under the sunlight. Although she didn't want to admit it, her heart felt a bit uncomfortable. Even if she had already made up her mind to no longer have anything to do with him, seeing him injured and haggard, her heart still ached. Feelings that had been given out couldn't be taken back just like that. If it were that easy, there wouldn't be so many infatuated men and women in the world. Moreover, he was right in front of her and was injured because of her. Her emotions would still be affected. When Higashio Motetsu woke up, it was already noon. He slowly opened his eyes and saw a dark stone wall. His mind was a bit muddled and he couldn't immediately react to where he was. It wasn't until he saw the person fiddling with the herbs that he remembered what had happened before. Half a year ago, she left without saying a word. He chased her from North Korea to Sichuan. When he finally found her, she was angry with him and in the end he was poisoned. He moved his stiff bones and his sleeves made a sound. The person in front of him looked at him and then continued to study the herbs in her hands without saying a word. If it were in the past, she would have rushed over and asked about his well-being. She wouldn't be like now, with a face full of, "Don't bother me," looking at the person who was a few steps away from him, as if she wanted to draw a line with him. A hint of displeasure rose in his heart. He touched his lips and teased, "Why are you so far away from me? Are you afraid that I'll eat you?" This time, Tao Tao didn't even raise her head. She said indifferently, "Aren't you saying the opposite? In your current state, I can deal with you with one hand." He raised his eyebrows. He hadn't seen her for a few months, but the little witch's tone had grown. However, he really didn't have much strength now. This snake venom was indeed overbearing. He wanted to say something to her, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw the wild fruits on the shelf beside him. They were placed on the washed lotus leaves. The red and green matched each other, making him very hungry. He raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. "For me. Eat it or leave it." Although her tone wasn't good, it didn't affect the young master's appetite at all. He picked up one and stuffed it into his mouth. It was sweet and refreshing and the juice was rich. It could relieve his thirst and satisfy his hunger. It was a good food. As he ate, he asked, "Have you eaten it?" "Yes, I've eaten it. Those are all for you." Higashio Motetsu snickered in his heart when he heard this. Only then did Tao Tao realize that she had accidentally said too much just now. She was a little annoyed. She stood up and said to him, "I still have to pick herbs, so I won't stay here. You can rest alone and contact your subordinates." Seeing that he was about to speak, she beat him to it. "Don't say that you can't contact them. I know that the Moon Palace uses signal fireworks to communicate." Higashio Motetsu, who had been scolded, chuckled. "You really know a lot." Tao Tao snorted. Don't think that she was really a 3-year-old child who could be easily bullied. "If I contact them and they don't arrive so quickly, and I can't go out, what if I starve to death?" Hearing his obviously shameless tone, Tao Tao really wanted to smash the basket on his face to see if it would hurt with his thick skin. "I'll keep it until night." She gritted her teeth and then left without looking back. "Remember to be careful not to step on the snake." Higashio Motetsu watched her stomp heavily on the ground to vent her anger. He held his chin and smiled triumphantly. Chapter 1719. When she left the cave and felt the cool breeze, her rationality returned. She sighed softly. How could she be so easily led into a ditch by him? She shook off the worries from her head and remembered her business. There were a lot of herbs she needed on this mountain. She looked at the sky and thought that half a day was not enough for her to find them. She might have to come back tomorrow. Time waits for no one. She continued to walk into the lush forest. This time, she was very careful when she walked, afraid that another snake would appear. She thought to herself that she was not being careful because of his reminder. When the basket was filled, the sky was already a little dark. The sun was setting on the mountain and was about to set. She returned to the entrance of the cave and dawdled for a while before she made up her mind to walk in. He was still the same person, but he had changed into a comfortable posture. He was leaning against the mountain wall with a leisurely expression. He did not look like an injured person at all. If the scene was different, with flowers, wine, and beauties, he would be the butterfly that passed through thousands of flowers without being touched by a single leaf. Higashio Motetsu, who heard the sound of footsteps, raised his head with some joy. However, he was suddenly frightened by the anger in her eyes. He asked himself, since she left, he had been obedient and did not cause any trouble. Why was this little witch looking at him like that? What was worse was that he actually felt a little guilty. Tao Tao put down the basket heavily, stretched her shoulders and arms, and looked around the dark cave. She thought for a while and said, "Wait for me." Then she went out and came back with a pile of firewood. She lit it with a match and the cold cave was suddenly filled with light and warmth. It was colder in the mountain at night than outside. She had been careless just now. After making the firewood, she touched her shriveled belly and turned to go out again. Higashio Motetsu looked at the person who had disappeared into the cave in a hurry and rubbed his eyebrows. He had not said a word to her since just now. He could not help but sigh faintly at the flickering light. However, his whole body was gradually filled with warmth and his eyebrows were also tinged with a smile. No matter what, this little witch still cared about him. However, he was thinking too much. Tao Tao only wanted to quickly cure him and send him away. He was bored and recalled her every move in the past 2 days. He came to a conclusion in his heart. This little witch was still angry. If she wanted to make up with him, he had to wait for her anger to subside. Anyway, he came here this time to coax her. If she wanted to vent her anger, he would let her vent it. Anyway, he would not lose a piece of flesh. As she thought about it, she came back. This time, she was not only holding the berries she had picked in the afternoon, but also a pheasant. He smiled and said, "I didn't expect our little witch to be so capable." Tao Tao ignored him and placed the berries in front of him. She then pulled out her dagger and sat down to clean up the prey. Over the past 2 days, he had gotten used to her indifference. While eating a berry, he asked casually, "Are you familiar with this place?" In the past, when she was by his side, she rarely spent time in the wilderness. Basically, she walked in towns and villages. Moreover, her food and accommodation were taken care of by the Moon Palace's subordinates, so she did not need to find her own food. Although he did not like her following him at that time, she was still a girl. He had always been protective of her, so he treated her the same as he did when it came to food and accommodation. So now that he was here, he saw her picking wild fruits to start a fire. Everything was done with great familiarity and independence. This made him very curious. How did she live before she met him? "I grew up in this area." She lowered her head and replied. He watched her move the dagger nimbly. He thought that since she lived in the Devil's Valley and the magic doctor was very good at making money, she should not need to rely on herself. At the very least, she should have someone to serve her. So he could not help but ask, "What's your sect like?" Tao Tao paused when she heard this, then raised her head. Her eyes were calm, but there seemed to be a hint of mockery in them. "Didn't you not want to know before?" Higashio Motetsu choked. He did not know how he had offended this little demoness. After Tao Tao finished speaking, she lowered her eyes. A faint trace of sadness flashed across her eyes. When she was by his side in the past, she had once told him about her sect. It was a pity that he had never heard of it. She passed the branch through the prey and roasted it over the fire. There was nothing else to do after that. She just watched the fire. So she took out the same medicinal herbs as she did in the afternoon and crushed them. She squatted in front of him and said calmly, "I'll change your medicine." He obediently stretched out his leg and looked at her without blinking. Tao Tao felt her scalp go numb from his gaze. She casually found a topic to talk about. "Where are your subordinates?" "I don't know where they went. They're not reliable at all." As expected, when she asked about this, he gave her an excuse that he had thought of long ago. Tao Tao retracted her hand and looked at him coldly. "Then I have no choice. Staying until now is my limit. I'll be leaving soon. You'll have to find a way to leave this place." "Tao Tao, you can't do this. I haven't cleared the poison yet and my subordinates are not by my side. Aren't you afraid that my corpse will be exposed in the wilderness?" He stared at the shadow on her face as she lowered her eyes. Her long eyelashes fluttered and tickled his heart like a feather. He spent a lot of energy to restrain himself from reaching out to touch her. Otherwise, his hard-won peace with her would be ruined again. "That's your problem. It has nothing to do with me." Tao Tao sat back in her original position and flipped the roast chicken. Higashio Motetsu glared at her. He hated it when she treated him like a stranger. Tao Tao was a little surprised that he did not make a fuss. The two of them did not speak. The cave suddenly quieted down. Other than the crackling sound of the firewood and the sizzling sound of the oil from the roast chicken, there was only the sound of the wind. However, it was all isolated outside by the warmth and did not feel cold at all. Tao Tao crushed the herbs that she picked as seasoning and sprinkled them on the skin of the roast chicken. Soon, there was a burst of meat fragrance that made people drool. When the roast was almost done, she picked it up and touched it gently. It was very hot. She waited for it to cool down a little before pulling off a drumstick and handing it to him. Here. Higashio Motetsu did not even lift his eyelids. He crossed his arms and said, "I'm not eating." Tao Tao frowned. "You've only been eating fruits for the whole day. If you don't eat some meat, your body won't be able to take it." He lifted his chin and said proudly, "You don't care about my life or death. Why do you care about whether I can take it or not? Eat, I won't eat. If I starve to death, I deserve it. Anyway, no one will collect my corpse." Tao Tao's mouth twitched. Why didn't she know that he had such a willful and shameless side? However, he was injured. His face was haggard and his expression was weak. Coupled with his stubborn look, he really looked pitiful. She pursed her lips. The two sides were in a deadlock. In the end, she compromised. "I said that I'll go back to the Devil's Valley tonight. So, I'll come to see you tomorrow." Higashio Motetsu took the drumstick with satisfaction. His eyes were shining with pride. Tao Tao averted her eyes and did not want to look at him. Otherwise, she would not be able to resist the urge to beat him up later. Chapter 1720. I've already sprinkled some snake-repellent powder at the entrance of the cave, so you can sleep better at night. There's also half a roast chicken on the shelf and some fruits on the lotus leaves. If you're hungry, you can fill your stomach. I'll bring you breakfast tomorrow morning. After dinner, Tao Tao changed his medicine again and got up to go back. Tao Tao. She had just taken a step when she heard him calling her. She touched her hand and turned around, her expression indifferent. "What else do you need me to do?" Higashio Motetsu looked at the person whose face was red from the light of the fire and felt a little reluctant to part with her. He wanted her to stay, but he was in no position to do so. There was no infatuation or joy in her eyes, only indifference and alienation. He felt a little bitter in his heart. "It's okay, be careful on the way," he said, then added, "Also, don't forget to come back tomorrow." Tao Tao nodded and directly left the cave. In front of her was the vast night. The grass was occasionally blown by the wind, rustling. A firefly flew by in front of her, its light weak. She couldn't help but stop and look up at the brilliant stars in the sky. "Tao Tao, do you think you're worthy of young Master Dongting? Do you know how much higher the status of the woman beside him is than yours? How can the light of a firefly compete with the brilliance of the moon?" The words of a woman from an aristocratic family she met when she followed him to deal with the internal strife of the Moon Palace rang in her ears. Yes, a firefly is a firefly. No matter how hard you try, you can't compare to the brilliance of the stars and the moon. The facts that you didn't want to admit before, when you decided to let go, are laid out in front of you one by one. You and I are not fated to be together. It's all because of me. Originally, she thought that after returning to the sect, she would have nothing to do with him. She didn't expect that he would come here. Although she didn't understand his purpose, she couldn't go on like this. Alas, she could only be soft-hearted this time. Next time, she wouldn't care about him. Her gaze no longer looked at the fireflies dancing in the wind, but unswervingly walked in the direction of the Devil's Valley. Watching her figure disappear into the darkness, Higashio Motetsu covered his face with his hand and sighed. "Higashio Motetsu, oh Higashio Motetsu, to think that you would have such a day. Trapped by love and longing for someone." After a while, someone came into the cave. "Palace Lord, are your injuries serious? Do you need me to call the doctor over?" As soon as Xuanqizimo came in, he saw that the usually energetic person was now listless. Startled, he hurried over and asked worriedly, "What's wrong?" "With Tao Tao here, what are you worried about?" Higashio Motetsu raised his hand and pushed his subordinate's face away in disdain. Only then did Xuanqizimo heave a sigh of relief. He found a place in the cave and sat down. He said with a smile, "I almost forgot that Miss Tao Tao's medical skills are unparalleled in the world. There's nothing that can't stop her." Higashio Motetsu nodded. Although he was praising the little witch, he felt honored and happy. Seeing a smile on the palace lord's face, Xuanzimo was relieved. He touched his shriveled belly and looked around. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He reached out to take the golden roast chicken, but his hand was slapped away by his master halfway. He blinked his pitiful eyes and said, "Palace Lord, I've been waiting for you outside for a long time. I'm starving to death. Please give me some food." "If you're hungry, go find food yourself. Don't touch these." It was rare for Cao Cao to give him some food, so he didn't allow others to touch it. Seeing that the palace lord was so protective of his food, it was useless to act coquettishly. Xuanzimo had no choice but to run out and catch prey himself. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, another 2 hours had passed. Xuanzimo asked curiously, "Palace Lord, how long are we going to stay here?" "It depends," Higashio Motetsu said casually. "Has Miss Tao Tao forgiven you?" As soon as he said that, he immediately saw the palace lord looking at him with a fake smile. He immediately covered his mouth, indicating that he hadn't asked anything just now. He really didn't know how to read people's minds. He had touched a sore spot. Miss Tao Tao must still be angry with him for leaving him here. Otherwise, according to past experience, Tao Tao definitely wouldn't feel at ease leaving him alone. Xuanzimo couldn't help but scold himself in his heart. Looking at his subordinate's cautious smile, Higashio Motetsu looked away and recalled what had happened today. Although he hadn't been forgiven by Tao Tao, he was much better than yesterday. At least, she didn't want to see him get into an accident. If she had really decided to cut all ties with him and left after draining his blood and detoxifying his poison, seeing a glimmer of hope, Higashio Motetsu's lips curled into a smile. Ever since Xuanzimo had angered the palace lord, he didn't dare to say anything else. Now, seeing the smile on the palace lord's face, he couldn't help but shiver. What was the palace lord thinking? "Zimo." The person who had been called immediately straightened his back. "Your subordinate is here. Tomorrow, as long as Tao Tao is here, you and the others are not allowed to appear." Higashio Motetsu licked his lips. As long as there was no one around him, he didn't believe that she would be so heartless as to abandon him. Xuanzimo nodded. "Your subordinate obeys." The firewood was still burning. Higashio Motetsu took the dry wood she had left behind and slowly added it. His gaze fell on the flickering flames, his gaze somewhat vacant. The words she had said tonight were still vivid in his mind. She seemed to be very disappointed in him. He recalled how she had often chattered by his ear in the past. Most of the time, he had fallen asleep, but she had continued to talk. It seemed that she had mentioned it to him before, but he hadn't heard it or hadn't taken it to heart. Was this how it felt to like someone? In the past, he hadn't cared. No matter how she had pestered him again and again, he had turned a blind eye. Now that he had truly fallen in love with her, even the slightest detail in his memory was enough to tug at his heart and cause him to slowly ache. This was probably what he deserved. Investigate the Devil Valley. Don't let Tao Tao know. Xuanzimo was guarding vigilantly. When he heard the palace master's voice, he seemed a little disappointed. He couldn't help but carefully poke his head out. The palace master's attention fell on the fire. His eyes were lowered, casting a shadow on his face. It was impossible to see his current expression. He hurriedly replied, "Your subordinate obeys." Compared to Higashio Motetsu's sleepless night, Xuanzimo had a good night's sleep until he was kicked awake early in the morning. "Palace master, why did you wake up so early?" Xuanzimo rubbed his sleepy eyes and asked with a yawn. A certain someone hadn't slept all night. Seeing that he was full of energy, he coldly snorted. "Hurry up and leave for this young master." Xuanzimo immediately shuddered. "Your subordinate will leave now. By the way, do you need me to prepare food for you?" "No need." His little enchantress would prepare food for him. Thinking of this, a certain someone smiled proudly. However, a certain someone waited anxiously until the person delivering breakfast arrived late. Sure enough, the little enchantress was still angry. He had almost starved to death. Chapter 1721. Tao Tao, Are you planning to starve me to death? As soon as Tao Tao entered the cave, she saw the person in front of her looking at her weakly. She felt a little apologetic. I was delayed by something. Hurry up and eat. She didn't do it on purpose. As soon as she went out this morning, she was stopped by second senior brother, who insisted that she try a new poisonous pet. She was afraid that he would be suspicious, so she had to deal with him for a long time before she escaped from him. Otherwise, if he knew that Dong Ting was here, it would mean that her master knew as well. Then her life would be in danger. But she didn't intend to tell him these things. After all, they had nothing to do with each other. Seeing that she took out the food box from the basket and put it in front of him, refusing to talk about it, Higashio Motetsu didn't ask further. This porridge tastes good, he praised with a smile. Tao Tao was a little absent-minded. Although the Devil's Valley was a place that even the orthodox and evil sects didn't dare to offend, and the rumors were very mysterious, only people who lived in the Devil's Valley knew what kind of existence the Devil's Valley was. They had been competing with each other since they were young. Only the strong could survive to the end. At that time, there were 100 or 200 people who entered the Devil's Valley, but now there were less than 10 of them. From a young age, if they wanted to survive, they had to learn how to be self-reliant. Therefore, she learned how to wash clothes and cook when she was 3 years old. At first, she just did it to fill her stomach. It wasn't until she met the person in front of her that she began to study how to make food delicious. Qin Yan had taught her that if she wanted to capture a man's heart, she had to capture his stomach first. But this person who grew up in a pile of delicious food, how could his stomach be so easy to capture? In the past 3 years, she had made so many dishes for him, but he had never praised her. Now, she had nothing to ask for, but she heard his praise. Unfortunately, it was too late. She calmed down and couldn't help but feel a touch of bitterness in her heart. This was what it meant to plant flowers that didn't bloom, but to tear down willows that didn't bloom. She didn't have the mood. Higashio Motetsu felt that she was really too quiet. She wasn't like before, spinning around him like a top. Her temper was also a little more lively. In the past, when he was alone in the Devil's Valley, he was used to liveliness and silence. But now, he felt that the atmosphere was too cold, making him uncomfortable. He broke the silence. Do you want some? No need, I've already eaten. After you finish eating, I'll check your wound and change the medicine while I'm at it. Tao Tao continued to fiddle with the few porcelain bottles she brought and replied without raising her head. Seeing this, he didn't say anything else and finished his meal in a few bites. Tao Tao opened the old ointment and looked at it carefully. Although the herbs yesterday were taken from the local area, the effect is not bad. I will apply the new ointment for you. In 2 or 3 days, the wound will be able to form a scab. He looked at her serious and beautiful side profile and coughed softly before looking away. Just now, he actually had an impulse to hold her in his arms. His fingers rubbed back and forth, and he somewhat missed the feeling of hugging her yesterday. In the past, he saw her jumping up and down, full of vitality. He did not expect her to have such a small frame. She was too delicate, and it was easy to carry her. While he was in a daze, a hand appeared in front of him. The fingers were white and round, extremely cute. But he still calmed his mind and his attention fell on the pill in her palm. He raised his head and looked at her in confusion. This is used to clear the remaining poison in your body. After eating it, you will be completely detoxified by tomorrow at the latest. Tao Tao handed the pill in front of him again, her expression incomparably serious. He nodded and reached out to take the pill. His fingers could not help but touch her skin. One was cold and one was hot. The two of them did not show it on their faces, but their hearts could not help but tremble. Tao Tao quickly withdrew her hand and held it tightly behind her back. Higashio Motetsu felt that it was a pity. At this time, a bottle of water appeared in front of him. He shook his head and swallowed the pill. The person in front of her had his phoenix eyes slightly closed, hiding his gorgeous charm. His thick black and curly eyelashes trembled slightly. His skin was like jade and snow, and his thin red lips were captivating. Her reason was slightly shaken. When she first saved him, it was just a spur of the moment. Later on, she changed her mind and chased after him because when he opened his eyes, It was as if he had restrained the splendor of a flourishing age. It was so captivating that it could take one's soul away. Now that his eyes were closed and restrained the splendor, it still caused ripples in her heart. This person was indeed an evildoer. In order to be worry-free, she had to stay far away from this evildoer. She composed herself and then said, "After you eat the pill, your body will be fine soon. Tomorrow, you will regain your strength and be able to walk freely. When you recover, leave the Devil Valley. Don't come back in the future. This place is indeed not safe. My master doesn't like to see strangers." Higashio Motetsu heard this and opened his eyes, staring at her. "Is it your master who doesn't like to see strangers, or you don't want to see me?" Both. She turned her eyes away and didn't look at him. Higashio Motetsu was stunned. This little demoness was really direct. She didn't know how to be tactful at all. She really gave him a headache. He decided not to talk about this topic anymore. Otherwise, he would be angered to death. "Didn't you promise me before that you wouldn't throw me away if you didn't cure me? Why are you going back on your word after just one night? You can't go back on your word like this." This time, it was Tao Tao's turn to be stunned. "Didn't I cure you? Who knows if your medicine is useful or not? What if my injury worsens?" He crossed his arms and said unyieldingly, "Hey, how can you be so unreasonable? If you don't believe in my medical skills, what else can you do?" Tao Tao's cold expression suddenly cracked. "How could there be such a person? You already said that we will go our separate ways. How can I believe you?" He was clearly sitting and she was standing, but she felt like he was looking down on her. Tao Tao's mouth twitched. She had never seen such a rogue side of him before. In the end, she had no choice but to compromise. "Then what do you want? If I haven't recovered tomorrow, you can come over and check on me." He didn't want to push her too far. Otherwise, he would be the one who had to coax her in the end. "Why didn't I see you so afraid of death before?" Seeing that everything here was settled, Tao Tao took the basket on her back, threw down this sentence, and left in a huff. Looking at the person who was so angry that she ran away, Higashio Motetsu couldn't help but laugh. However, after laughing, he became melancholic. If she was really cured tomorrow, she would still leave. What should he do to make her stay? After thinking for a while, Higashio Motetsu knocked on the stone wall rhythmically. There was one more person in the cave. "Go find a doctor and get some medicine to delay the illness or worsen the injury. Just don't let the snake poison get rid of in a day or two." When Xuanqi Zimo received this order, he was so shocked that his mouth opened wide. "You could stuff 2 eggs in it. What if you are discovered? Life is like a play. It all depends on acting." Xuanqi Zimo swallowed. "You are really willing to go all out for your wife?" Higashio Motetsu chuckled. "I can't help it. A single dog like you won't understand." Xuanqi Zimo clutched his chest. He had been shot even though he was kneeling. Chapter 1722. When Tao Tao returned to the Devil's Valley, she had a headache because she remembered that tomorrow was the day of the competition with her eldest senior sister. On one hand, it was an unpredictable competition. On the other hand, she had to deal with Dong Ting's injury. It was really annoying. She had promised to be soft-hearted this time. Why had she been tricked by him again? Tao Tao rubbed her eyebrows. Forget it. She had to think about how to deal with the eldest senior sister's competition first. The eldest senior sister was not as difficult to deal with as the 4th senior sister. However, in the entire Devil's Valley, she was the one she couldn't provoke except for her master. Otherwise, it would be difficult for her to live peacefully until the day when she would officially compete for the position of the master of the Devil's Valley. The moon set and the sun rose. It was a new day. Higashio Motetsu stood at the entrance of the cave with his eyes half narrowed. It was already late in the morning. Why hadn't the little witch come yet? Did she stand him up? "Palace Master, is it because Miss Tao Tao was bullied by you in the past, so she wants to get back at you this time? Is that why she didn't come?" Xuanqi Zimo had been waiting outside for a long time, but Tao Tao didn't come back. He was afraid that the palace master would be hungry, so he immediately found some food. Looking at the man who was almost standing like a wife-gazing rock, he blurted out, However, these words obviously touched the wife-gazing rock's sore spot. He glared at the man in front of him and said, "Go and eat your fruit." Xuanqi Zimo immediately took 3 steps back and gently slapped his mouth. What nonsense was that? Higashio Motetsu withdrew his angry eyes and his jaw tightened. He was not angry because his subordinate said that Tao Tao would take revenge on him, but because of the last sentence. He had a faint guess in his heart but didn't want to face it. He was afraid that she wouldn't come to see him again. Because the cave was close to the top of the mountain, the scenery below was panoramic. Although there were dead branches and rotten leaves everywhere, the ground began to be green. It was a sign that everything was recovering. However, as he looked at the boundless world, a hint of panic suddenly rose in his heart. He suddenly recalled that during the first year that she had been following him, he had returned to deal with the Moon Palace sect to eliminate any future problems for Qin Yen. He had often disappeared without a trace, leaving her behind in the Moon Palace sect. It was not uncommon for them to not see each other for 3 to 10 days. At that time, was she like him now, waiting but afraid of being left behind? He chuckled softly, as if he wanted to taste everything that she had endured in the past. But this was just the tip of the iceberg, and he could not stand it. At that time, she had to bear the burden of not being recognized, not being accepted, and hoping that there would be a response. How uneasy must she have felt? At this moment, he finally understood the feeling of shooting himself in the foot. Just like that, Higashio Motetsu waited until evening with uneasiness, disappointment, and anxiety. The mountain breeze in early spring still carried a bone-piercing chill, especially when it was close to night. Therefore, when Tao Tao walked to the front of the mountain gate, he saw a figure soaked in the mountain wind like a stone sculpture. "Why are you sitting here? It's windy in the mountains, why aren't you going in?" Although she was angry that this person didn't care about his body, she still couldn't help but care about him. Her clear and melodious voice rang in his ears. For a moment, he thought that he was hearing things because he missed her too much. It wasn't until her sash fluttered in the wind drifted into his line of sight that he raised his head somewhat sluggishly. Seeing the person in front of him angrily glaring at him, his long frozen face finally warmed up, and a smile slowly appeared on his face. The feeling of regaining something that he had lost was even hotter than learning the 16 styles of the falling moon. "You're here. I once thought that you wouldn't come back." He wanted to reach out to hug her and then fiercely pull her into his embrace, never letting her leave him again. But before he could move, Tao Tao had already brushed past him and walked into the cave. She was puzzled. She had only not seen him for a day and a night, so why did she feel like he had become a fool? Higashio Motetsu slowly closed his fingers and looked down with a faint smile. "It's fine, there's still plenty of time, so there's no rush." So he turned and followed behind her, walking into the cave. Once he went in, the lion's roar from Hedong almost made his ears fall off. "What have you been doing all day? You didn't even light a fire. Aren't you cold? Why didn't you eat the fruit I left for you? Didn't I bring you some dry rations? Why haven't you eaten? Do you really not care about your body? Then why don't I give you a bottle of poison and end it all?" He wanted to use this as an excuse to say that she hadn't made him any food all day, but he never thought that she would turn the tables on him. Now he was the one being unreasonable. But without knowing why, the current her was no longer that unfamiliar and distant. It was like there was a shadow of when they were together in the past. After Tao Tao roared at him, she found that not only did this fellow not feel any shame or regret, he even broke out into a smile. She was stunned. What was wrong with him? Could it be that the snake's poison entered his brain and made him stupid? However, other than seeing him smile from the bottom of his heart with Qinyan, she had rarely seen him smile like this. She rubbed her nose and did not plan on talking to him anymore. Instead, she squatted down to clean up the fire and start a new one. This kind of young master, other than being served by others, he did not have any sense of independence at all. Forget it, it was her bad luck to meet him. Very quickly, the fire lit up the entire cave, covering the cold night with a layer of warm and soft light. She took out the food box and handed it to him. "Your dinner." Perhaps it was because her roar just now had deterred him, he obediently took it. Then, while eating, he looked at her as if he wanted to say something. If it was someone else, Cao Cao wouldn't have cared, but the person in front of her was the famous flawless white jade on the list of the most handsome men in Jianghu. Although his appearance was the complete opposite of this noble and proud reputation, he was still a true peerless evildoer. Now that she was being stared at by him like this, no matter how calm she was, there would still be ripples. Everyone loved beauty and she was one of the most outstanding. Being stared at by him made her feel uncomfortable, so she deliberately put on a stern face and said, "What's the matter? Where's my breakfast and lunch?" Hearing this, Cao Cao's neck stiffened as she turned to look at him. Was this still the arrogant and charming Higashio Motetsu she knew? He actually complained to her about food. "I was delayed by something in the Devil's Valley, so I only had time to come over now." Higashio Motetsu was obviously not satisfied with this answer. When did other things take precedence over him? He remembered that it was not like this in the past. When he was injured, she would prioritize him before doing other things. Now, her answer made his heart sour. Seeing him bury his head in eating after asking a question, as if his mind was completely focused on the food, as if nothing else was more important. Cao Cao stared at him for a while and felt puzzled. Why did it feel like this person was angry with her? She pinched her palms and suddenly sobered up. He was the palace master of the Moon Palace. How could he be childish and angry over 2 meals? She shook her head and continued to add firewood. Chapter 1723. As though he was competing with something, Higashio Motetsu quickly gobbled down the food. When Cao Cao took over the food box, she thought to herself, "That's right, this guy has been hungry for an entire day." Hence, she kept the box and did not think much about it. What were you delayed by? She had been delayed for an entire day. Even though he knew that she would not answer truthfully even if he asked her now, a certain someone was very uncomfortable about being placed last. Furthermore, seeing that she had no intention of explaining, he could not help but ask. Cao Cao pursed her lips. Her competition with Grand Senior Sister had been delayed until now. The content of the competition was simple: use the other party's poison on yourself. Whoever could neutralize it first would win. If both of them could not neutralize it, the one who could not withstand the antidote first would lose. There were no stakes in the competition. However, the outcome was either life or death. If one could not neutralize the poison and the opponent did not save them, they could only wait for death. Grand Senior Sister was better than her and used 2 hours to neutralize her poison and win the competition. After neutralizing her poison, she looked at her coldly and left, not caring about her life or death. Thankfully, she had used up all her strength to neutralize the poison. However, she had used up all her strength and barely managed to return to her room before fainting. If not for the fact that she was still in the cave, she would not have woken up so early. Grand Senior Sister had used a secret medicine this time. It was clear that she really wanted her to die. However, she did not die and even neutralized the poison. Grand Senior Sister must have hated her even more and would probably target her in the future. Fortunately, the real competition was about to begin and she did not have to worry too much. However, surviving a disaster did not mean that one would have good fortune in the future. I didn't expect the competition to take so long. Cao Cao smiled at him. Sorry to have kept you waiting. Higashio Motetsu looked at her suspiciously. Every time she lied, the corners of her lips would curl upwards. It was the same just now. Why did she lie? At that moment, he did not know what kind of life and death ordeal this girl before him had gone through today. It was already a blessing from the heavens that she could appear before him safely. It's good that you know. I thought you weren't coming and Zimo even mocked me as a door god. What did you say? Cao Cao only heard him mumbling but did not hear the content clearly. Higashio Motetsu snorted softly. Nothing. Although Cao Cao did not show it on the surface, she was laughing uncontrollably on the inside. Today, he had really lived for a long time. He might have really gone stupid, but as she watched, her eyes became more focused. She said in her heart, Dong Ting, do you know that if you're a little later, I might not be alive anymore? I wonder if you would occasionally think of me, That silly girl who always pestered you? Probably not. After all, you once hated me. The bonfire crackled. Dongting Wangyu suddenly felt that the atmosphere had somehow turned cold again. He frowned. When they were together before, he had never felt this way. Was it because no one was talking to him? He coughed softly and said, "Then how was the final exchange?" "Or you?" Tao Tao said faintly, "I'm not good enough, so I lost." Higashio Motetsu was stunned for a moment before he smiled and comforted her. Victory and defeat are common. Don't be sad. You just have to learn well and win against them in the future. It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. This was his way of doing things. She had always known that although he looked gentle, he was actually very vengeful. He was very similar to her in this aspect. He could endure hardships, but he would never suffer losses. I will get it back." Tao Tao nodded. Seeing her smile, he became spirited and raised his voice. He said proudly, "That's right. I saw that you didn't look well just now and thought that you were in a bad mood. Don't worry, if you were bullied, I will take revenge for you." Tao Tao smiled and shook her head. "I will take care of my own matters." "But you don't believe in my ability?" The East Court freak was very unhappy that his ability was questioned. She sat down in front of him and rested her chin on her hand. "How should I put it? The Devil's Valley is different from the Imperial Court and the Jianghu. It has the Jianghu swordsmanship and the Imperial Court's schemes and secret plots. However, there are many differences. You are not a member of the Devil's Valley, so it's difficult for you to use your ability there. It's better for me to do it myself." Higashio Motetsu was happy to see that she rarely took the initiative to sit so close to him. However, after hearing her words, he couldn't help but frown. Why does it sound like the Devil's Valley is a dragon's pool and a tiger's den? She didn't want to tell him so much, but she was worried that he would be curious and unwilling to leave after his injury was healed. She was worried that her master would find out, so she revealed a little. However, she forgot that this person had a little problem. The more novel and dangerous something was, the more he liked to get close to it. She regretted saying too much. Before she could speak, he said, "Tao Tao, if it's so complicated here, you don't have to stay. I'll take you out." She was stunned by his words. She raised her head and looked into his eyes, trying to see if he was joking, but there was nothing but sincerity. She suddenly couldn't understand him. However, at this time, she was a little tired after detoxification and didn't have the energy to think about it. She waved her hand and said, "I was just joking with you. Come, let me check if the poison has been removed." One couldn't wait to cover it up, while the other felt guilty when he heard that she was going to check. Therefore, the two quickly missed this topic. This time, Tao Tao reached out and put her hand on his wrist to feel his pulse. While she was feeling it carefully, Higashio Motetsu put all his attention on her fingers. Her smooth and cold fingertips fell on his skin, making his heart itch. However, he knew that he couldn't do anything now. Otherwise, he would only push her further and further away. Realizing this, Higashio Motetsu's heart sank. At this time, Tao Tao muttered to herself, "That's strange. There should be no residual poison. Why hasn't your body recovered and is even weaker than yesterday?" He was close. Although he didn't hear everything, he guessed it based on her expression. He snickered in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it. If he did, he would be exposed. Tao Tao asked him to change his hand. He obediently did so, but the result was the same. Tao Tao couldn't stay calm. "What did you do today?" Facing Tao Tao's question, Dong Ting Evildoer answered honestly, "Waiting for you." She was choked by his sad appearance. Wasn't she just late by a day? Why did this person act like a resentful husband? Look into my eyes and say it again. She didn't believe that he would be so obedient. Dong Ting Evildoer looked into her eyes and repeated it again. He took the medicine last night, not today, so he was telling the truth. Chapter 1724. Although there were many suspicious points, she was confident that there was nothing wrong with her medicine. However, nothing was absolute. Moreover, she was currently exhausted, so she didn't pursue the matter. Higashio Motetsu was worried that she wouldn't believe him, so he didn't notice that her face was a little pale. This is the 100 Poisons pill. It can detoxify common poisons, including the snake venom from yesterday. Eat it, and I'll come back tomorrow to take a look. It should be able to clean up the remaining poison. Tao Tao poured out a pill from the porcelain bottle and handed it to him. Fortunately, she had brought the medicine with her today for the competition and had forgotten to put it back in the cupboard. Otherwise, she would have to go back to get it. Not only was it a waste of time, but she also didn't have much strength left. In order not to arouse her suspicions, Higashio Motetsu took the pill and swallowed it in front of her without any hesitation. Tao Tao was very satisfied with his straightforwardness. Seeing that it was already very late, she prepared to stand up. However, the moment she got up, she felt a little dizzy and staggered. Higashio Motetsu immediately went up to support her. Only then did he realize that her expression was a little off. He scolded himself for being careless and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Where are you feeling unwell?" Actually, she was already feeling much better when he supported her. Her body instinctively wanted to shake off his hand, but when she saw the worry in his eyes, she didn't harden her heart. Instead, she shook her head. "Maybe it's because I've been too busy these past 2 days and haven't had enough rest. I'll go back and have a good sleep later." Hearing her say this, although he was still worried, compared to him, she was a doctor. No matter what, she would know more about medicine than him. He could only nod. Then, he thought of something and his eyes lit up. He wanted to say something, but she rejected him in advance. "I still have some medicinal herbs in my courtyard. I have to go back and collect them. I can't stay here. Your body hasn't fully recovered, so you should rest well. I won't disturb you." Saying this, she withdrew her hand from his. Then, without looking back, she took the things and left. It wasn't until she was out of sight that he reacted. He lowered his head and looked at his empty hands, just like his empty heart. How unbearable. Xuanqi Zimo walked in. When he saw that his palace mistress was in a daze, he immediately tiptoed and lightened his footsteps. "Palace mistress, are you all right?" Higashio Motetsu did not raise his head to look at him. "Tao Tao just left. Follow her and escort her. Don't let her find out." Since the palace master's voice was so low, it was obvious that something had happened. However, as a loyal subordinate, Xuanqi Zimo didn't dare disobey his orders. He immediately ran out to escort the person whom the palace master treasured the most. Tao Tao left the cave and was blown by the cold wind. She was much more clear-headed now. She smiled bitterly. Although she had cured her senior sister's poison, she had hurt her body because of the delay. However, it was not a big problem. She would be fine after some rest. However, she was more concerned about the way Dong Ting looked at her just now. That kind of nervousness and worry was something she had never seen from him before. And when she finally left, he seemed to be very hurt. She shook her head. How could a proud son of heaven like him have such a side to him? It was already good enough that he didn't hurt others. Therefore, she quickly put this matter to the back of her mind because it was no longer important. The next day, Higashio Motetsu didn't wait too long. He arrived early in the morning. He greeted her as usual and even had breakfast. He didn't seem to take what happened last night to heart. Tao Tao thought that she must have seen wrongly last night. This time, Higashio Motetsu still took the medicine given by Zimo as usual. The poison was still in his body, but when he faced her examination, he still felt very guilty. The little witch was very smart. When Tao Tao took his pulse, she found that the poison was not cured. Her expression immediately darkened. Could it be that there was something wrong with the medicine? She immediately took out the medicine bottle from last night and checked it. There was nothing wrong with the medicine. Moreover, she did watch him swallow the medicine last night. If there was nothing wrong with this, then the problem must be somewhere else. Tao Tao raised her head and narrowed her eyes, looking at him calmly and coldly. "Did you secretly do something?" Higashio Motetsu didn't expect her to see through him so quickly. He still wanted to struggle, but her eyes were so firm that he couldn't help but smile. Perhaps he could get away with it in other places, but in terms of medicine he was no match for her. "Tao Tao," he had just opened his mouth when she interrupted him angrily. "Higashio Motetsu, Do you want to die? You know that some medicine can't be taken carelessly, especially when it's related to poison. What do you want to do? The girl in front of him was so angry that her eyes were red. She glared at him and clenched her fists as if she wanted to throw him to the ground and punch him a few times. It was rare for her to be so angry. Although he was scolded, he knew that it was because she was worried that he would abuse his body. His heart warmed and he smiled seriously. I just want to see you. Cao Cao was on the verge of anger. His words were like a heavy downpour from the sky, drenching her anger. She was flustered and her mind was blank. She looked at the person in front of her in disbelief. This person was still the insufferably arrogant Higashio Motetsu who didn't care about anything. Could it be that someone was impersonating him? Who are you? Higashio Motetsu didn't expect that the first confession in his life would be questioned. However, he thought deeper. Cao Cao's first reaction wasn't to believe him, but to suspect. Did that mean that in her heart he was like this? Or did she really not believe that he would like her? No matter which possibility it was, he didn't want to see it. Who else can I be? Cao Cao, are you scared silly? I want to see you. Is it not enough for you to believe me? When have I, Higashio Motetsu, ever lied? Cao Cao looked at him, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. Yes, you disdain lying the most, but what does it have to do with me? Dong Ting, no matter what you think in your heart, no matter what you want to do, it has nothing to do with me. Higashio Motetsu looked at her in a daze. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. She reached out and put another bottle of medicine in his hand. This is to cure the poison in your body. Don't hurt your body. A lot of people will feel sorry for you. Then what about you? He looked at her, a trace of hope rising in his eyes. Cao Cao lowered her eyes, took a step back, and put some distance between them. She looked at him with a calm gaze. I won't anymore. You've never cared. I've traveled thousands of miles for you, but I've never once looked at you. My heart that has been hurt time and time again can never be healed. After Cao Cao finished speaking, she turned and left. This time, her back view was very resolute. Higashio Motetsu watched as she gradually walked away. He slowly clenched his hands, turned around, and heavily smashed them against the mountain wall. The back of his hand was covered in blood, but he didn't care at all. In the end, he sat down on the ground dispiritedly. Chapter 1725. Xuanshizimo had secretly escorted Cao Cao back. When he saw the palace master, who had lost his usual liveliness, he hurried over in fright. Palace master, what's wrong? Did the poison flare up? This subordinate went to bring Miss Cao Cao back. When he heard her name, Higashio Motetsu's eyes flickered. He said hoarsely, I'm fine. You don't have to look for her. Xuanshizimo had never seen his master like this. He hurriedly said, Then, palace master, is there anything this subordinate can do? As he spoke, he tried to think of a way to make the palace master a little happier. Just then the palace master spoke. Have you sent her back safely? This subordinate has been very discreet. Miss Cao Cao hasn't noticed. Very good. After a moment of silence, the palace master didn't say anything else. His expression was very calm. Xuanshizimo couldn't help but ask carefully, Palace master, did you quarrel with Miss Cao Cao? Quarrel? It would be fine if they could quarrel, but she didn't want to fight. In the past, when he said one sentence to her, he had to be prepared to be rebuked 10 times. Now, she didn't want to talk to him. She didn't even want to see his face. He had clearly shown his sincerity by coming here this time, so why was she still so cold? He scratched his head. What exactly went wrong? Seeing the palace master so irritated, Xuanshizimo had a vague idea. It seemed that the palace master didn't have a chance to quarrel with her even if he wanted to. Palace master, you've really hurt Miss Cao Cao's heart this time. In the past, he had seen Miss Cao Cao leave after being angered by his palace master. However, she would always return after a short while. She had never left without saying goodbye. However, this time, when he saw Miss Cao Cao again, he realized that she had changed. She was no longer so easy to get close to. It seemed that the girl who loved to laugh and fool around had only been willing to show that side of her in front of his palace master because she liked him. Now that she no longer had any feelings for him, she kept that side of her away. Higashio Motetsu was dejected. He had hurt her heart. If she had rejected him once or twice, he would still have thought that she was just throwing a tantrum. However, when she drew the line between them time and time again, he understood that this time, she really did not intend to forgive him, nor was she willing to turn back. Xuanqi Zimo glanced at the palace lord's expression and whispered, "If there was such a lady who treated me so well, I wouldn't have the heart to reject her. Miss Tao Tao was rejected so many times by you, but she still treated you well. It's clear that she loves you dearly." This subordinate has heard of such a saying among the common people. The crazier you like, the more clean and neat you are when you let go. Higashio Motetsu was stunned for a moment. He understood what he meant. The crazier a person was, the more likely they were to stake everything on a single throw. They would not give up easily. Once they gave up, it meant that there was no turning back. Higashio Motetsu's lips moved. Finally, he raised his hand to cover his face and smiled bitterly. In the end, he pushed her away with his own hands. The more she rejected him, the more he realized that he could not lose her. He could not lose her to that extent. "Palace Lord, don't be sad. Didn't you reject Miss Tao Tao many times in the past as well? You have to cheer up." Xuanqi Zimo was a little anxious when he saw the palace lord so dejected. After saying this, he realized that he had been too impatient and did not choose his words carefully. He did not know if he had stepped on the palace lord's sore spot. He had really touched on a sore spot. However, these words shocked Higashio Motetsu. That's right. She had been rejected so many times in the past, but after that, she could appear in front of him as if nothing had happened. Why was he so dejected after just a few setbacks? His phoenix eyes that had lost their light were once again dyed with luster. He patted his subordinate's head and said with a smile, "You finally said something right." Xuanqi Zimo looked at him in a daze. Higashio Motetsu opened the porcelain bottle that Tao Tao had left behind. He poured out a pill and swallowed it. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Have you found any news from the Devil Valley?" "It's already been investigated." Hearing the palace lord's question, Xuanqi Zimo finally remembered what he had come here for. He had only just received the news today, but the contents of the bottle had shocked him so much that he could not speak. If it weren't for the fact that he had seen the palace lord's soulless appearance when he returned, he would have spilled the beans long ago. Soon, only Xuanqi Zimo's voice remained in the cave. The sun was soft and beautiful, the mountain winds were blowing, and the earth was returning to spring. Everything seemed to be brimming with vitality, but a storm of blood was brewing. Tao Tao returned to the Devil Valley. Along the way, she encountered many of her fellow disciples who seemed to be in a hurry. She recalled that in 3 days, the official competition for the position of Devil Valley Master would begin. She hadn't thought that time would pass so quickly. It seemed that she had to make preparations as soon as possible. In these 3 days, she had been cultivating wholeheartedly, not daring to be distracted. Occasionally, she would think of the sincere and earnest eyes of that person in the cave. In that instant, she had almost believed him. But a missed opportunity was a missed opportunity. There was no time to make up for it. Perhaps she was still worried about whether or not he had taken the medicine she had left behind. Perhaps she would still recall the events of the past, but her determination would not change. Moreover, after what had happened that day, he would most likely return. He would no longer remain in the Devil Valley. Someone as proud and outstanding as him had been repeatedly humiliated by her. He would most likely not appear in front of her again. That was also good. She would have nothing to worry about. She was prepared to go all out, and she was also prepared to die. In this competition, there would only be one person who could survive. No matter how many disciples they had taken in, after a fierce battle, only the one who could survive would be the victor. Using 10 or 20 years to cultivate a successor, every step of the way stepping on the bones of their fellow disciples, this was the cruelty of the Devil Valley. From the day she returned to the Devil Valley, she had never thought about what would happen in the future. because whether or not she could survive was still unknown. She just hadn't expected that he would come here. Thinking of this, she patted her cheeks. Didn't she say that she would never think of him again? Why was she so disappointing again? At this time, a strong wind suddenly blew open the 2 windows in the room. Blinded by the wind, she couldn't help but frown. She got up to close the windows. She closed the windows to the east and then to the south. Clapping her hands, she turned around and found that there was one more person in the room. That person's back was facing her. Only when he felt her gaze did he slowly turn around. His eyebrows were the same as before, and the corner of his mouth hung a charming smile. Morning. His figure had been seen day and night for 3 years. How could she not recognize him? Moreover, he liked to wear purple. At first glance, she had recognized him. But even if she recognized him, so what? She gritted her teeth. Who could tell her why this guy had appeared here? Chapter 1726. Tao Tao's first reaction was that she was hallucinating because she thought too much about him. However, it was broad daylight and a living person was right in front of her. How could it be a hallucination? Her initial shock turned into anger. She angrily walked in front of him and said through gritted teeth, "Why are you here? Didn't I tell you to leave?" Looking at her angry eyes, Higashio Motetsu felt that she was very cute. The corner of his mouth curled up. "I came here to take my wife away. My wife is still here. How could I dare to leave alone?" Tao Tao was stunned by his shocking words. Was he talking about her? She looked up and saw his gaze fall on her. His eyes were filled with a playful smile. She felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on her. He never spoke the truth. How could she be so easily fooled? She despised herself for not being firm enough. Her face immediately darkened. "I don't welcome you here. If you want to find someone, go elsewhere. Don't be an eyesore in front of me." She almost said the word, scram. Higashio Motetsu heard the hidden meaning in her words. He couldn't help but rub his nose. His wife was so fierce. However, what he said was the truth. Was it because he wasn't sincere enough? He took a step forward and reached out to hold her hand. He restrained his smile and said seriously, "Tao Tao, I'm here to take you away." "Take me away? I'm fine here. Why should I leave with you just because of a sentence from you? Who do you think you are?" Because of her wild thoughts, Tao Tao warned herself in her heart that she couldn't be swayed by him. Thus, no matter what he said, she strongly refuted. The person in front of him was like an angry cat. Her cheeks were puffed up and red. She was too cute. He couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch her. However, he knew that the time wasn't right, so he restrained himself. He didn't mind that his hand was shaken off. He grabbed the person who was about to retreat and said seriously, "Because this place is too dangerous. Before, I didn't understand the Devil Valley, so I could let you stay here without worry. After all, it's your sect. However, now that I know the Devil Valley is such a dangerous place, I can't let you stay here." He knew all about it? How much did he know? Tao Tao stared at him blankly. He seemed to know what she was thinking. His eyes were filled with love as he continued to speak. "Tao Tao, no matter how angry you are with me now, don't hurt yourself. Come with me. When we get outside, you can punish me however you want. I promise you that I won't fight back or talk back. Okay? Tao Tao, no matter how angry you are with me now, don't hurt yourself. Come with me. When we get out, you can punish me however you want." Towards the end, he lowered his voice and gently coaxed her. Tao Tao stared blankly at the person in front of her. She had never seen such a gentle Higashio Motetsu before. But it was too late. She had already returned. "Dong Ting, it's useless. Since I'm back, I don't plan to leave. I can't leave. Besides, didn't we say that we wouldn't meet again? It was my fault in the past for always pestering you. I know you're annoyed with me. Don't worry, I won't do it again. You're free now." She said these words very calmly. Only her hands and her sleeves revealed her inner feelings. But she knew that he couldn't see it. She didn't know if it was because he had been rejected by her too many times these past few days, but he felt that he was too much of a bastard in the past to let her suffer so much. He took a step forward and hugged her tightly. Tao Tao, how can it be useless? If I want to take you away, who can stop me? Furthermore, you were the one who said those words. I never promised you anything. You were very good in the past. I was blind to mistake a pearl for a rock. Don't worry, I won't do it again. I don't want you to leave me. He whispered the last sentence into her ear. She didn't react in time when he suddenly hugged her, but now she was stunned by his words. Was he confessing to her? But how is this possible? This person hated her so much in the past. How could he suddenly like her? It was too ridiculous. In addition, she remembered the promise she made to her master. She reached out and pushed him away. She suppressed her emotions and tried to look at him calmly. Dong Ting, I don't know why you changed your attitude towards me. To tell you the truth, I'm not like what I show you. Since you already know about the Devil's Valley, you should know what kind of people can survive here for more than 10 years. I'm not optimistic at all. It's impossible for me to be gentle and understanding like Qingyan. The environment determines a person's character. I'm very cold and cold-blooded. My hands are stained with a lot of blood. I don't care what others think of me. To me, living or dying isn't too important. Life in the Devil's Valley is very dark. It's like being abandoned by the world. It's a place where sunlight can't reach. If I didn't meet you, I might never feel the warmth of the sun in my life. In order to stay by your side, I tried my best to make myself look more sunny. I didn't want you to find out that I'm different from ordinary women because I was worried that once you found out I was this kind of person, you would hate me even more. I'm very sorry. I've caused you a lot of trouble these past few years. I won't appear in front of you again. Let's forget everything that happened these past few years. After finally saying these words, Tao Tao breathed a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. However, what followed was a dense pain in her heart. Saying it wasn't as difficult as she thought, but it also didn't have no effect on her at all. She didn't care about how others looked at her, but she cared very much about how he would look at her. She laughed at herself. At this point, she was afraid he wouldn't want to take her away anymore. However, when she lowered her eyes and waited for him to leave, a large shadow enveloped her. She looked up and was caught off guard, but was tightly held in his arms. There was a great disparity in strength between men and women. Adding on his deep internal strength, she wasn't his opponent at all. She couldn't push him away at all. Forgot? How could I possibly forget? She heard the sound of him gritting his teeth and was scared. She felt like he was going to eat her alive. Although her guess was a bit off, it wasn't too far off. Her chin was lifted up by him. While she was panicking, she saw his eyes filled with anger as he leaned down and fiercely bit down on her lips. She changed. The person who wanted to cling on to him before was now pushing him away. No matter what he said, she wouldn't listen. He was already holding back his anger. Now that he saw her like this and couldn't persuade her, his heart was filled with anger. Those red lips were so moving, but they always said words that people couldn't listen to. He had long wanted to teach her a lesson. Chapter 1727. Tao Tao did not expect things to develop to this point. She just wanted to persuade him to leave, but why did he get angrier the more she said it? Why did he do this kind of thing just because he was angry? Wasn't he a very proud person? She had said so many things to make him lose face, so shouldn't he just turn around and leave? How did it turn out like this? When he was kissing her lips, she subconsciously wanted to push him away, but he seemed to have expected it. He held her wrists with one hand and held her waist with the other. Then he turned around and pressed her against the pillar. Her back was against the pillar and there was no way for her to retreat. But the person in front of her wanted a yard after taking an inch. His entire body was pressed against her body. It was a tight fit. The thin layer of clothes couldn't stop the hot skin and the hard chest. She was in a daze. Didn't this person look quite skinny? Why was he so well built? But at this time, her lips were bitten. She angrily glared at him. The latter curled his lips into a smile and gently licked the place he had bitten. Her red lips were bitten by him and revealed a trace of white. It was like snow on a red plum blossom, making his heart race. He tightened his arms and pulled her closer to him. His lips and tongue were even more nimble as he pried open her teeth and drove in, not giving her any room to breathe. The person who had the strength to resist earlier, after being touched like this, her entire body went limp. If it wasn't for the hand around her waist holding her in place, she would have gone limp and fallen to the ground. She could only angrily glare at him. She didn't know that her eyes looked like they were soaked in water. They were sparkling and very seductive. Higashio Motetsu pinched her waist and sighed in his heart. She really was a seductress. She was suddenly pinched by him and her face turned even redder. She wanted to push him away, but her body went limp. His eyes were filled with possessiveness as he attacked fiercely. It was like he wanted to eat her up. Cao Cao never thought that a person who looked calm and composed would have this side to him. He was like a wolf, a hungry wolf, and she was the prey in front of him. She was startled by her own wild imagination, but his following attack made her completely defeated, and she no longer had the heart to think about anything else. In the quiet room, the two figures stuck close to each other, and from time to time, they would make shameful noises. Higashio Motetsu moved away from her lips and loosened his grip on her wrist. She felt as if she had just been fished out of the water as she laid softly on his body. Her eyes were misty as if she had not recovered from the earlier confusion. He raised his hand and touched the corner of her lips. His almond-shaped eyes were filled with gentleness and the corners of his mouth were raised. It was clear that he was in a good mood as he spoke in a hoarse voice. Don't think about hiding from me in the future. What do you mean by this and that? Aren't you always you? In the past, I neglected you, and hurt you. I apologize. I will never treat you like that again. After you left, I realized that I had already taken you to heart. Cao Cao, don't leave me again. Just now, her mind was still in a mess, but after he spoke, she gradually regained her consciousness. She listened to him speak word by word, the gentle treatment and affectionate confessions that she had never received before, but had never received before. She felt like she was in a dream. Everything in the dream was what she longed for, but she would wake up from the dream sooner or later. Her fate with him had already been broken when she was in North Korea. In that downpour, she had already buried her love for him. When he spoke, he had been paying attention to the changes in her expression. At this moment, when she opened her mouth, he knew what she wanted to say. He lightly snorted. I don't want to hear you speak right now. Cao Cao was stunned. Why was this person so overbearing? She wanted to speak again, but she saw him tilting his head and kissing her deeply again. She was dumbfounded. This was kissing without saying anything. But in any case, let her say something. A new round of falling into the enemy's hands had begun. Your body is much more honest than you little devil who doesn't mean what you say. In her days, she seemed to have heard him say this. She was furious. What did he mean by saying what she said? She had never intended to see him again, okay? But her body was indeed very honest. Food and lust were part of human nature. In the face of beauty, how many people could control themselves? Again and again, he seemed to not know fatigue and liked this game. When she was out of breath, he would let go to let her rest for a while, and then after a while, he would kiss her again. She wanted to resist many times, but she couldn't move him at all. She could only bite him fiercely when their lips and tongues chased each other. Unfortunately, this person was too cunning, and he got his way every time. In the end, the hairpin fell, her hair was loose, and her clothes were messy. Only then did the two of them separate, panting. She leaned in his arms to regain her senses. When she had a bit of strength, she stretched out her hands to push him away. The moment she left his arms, she didn't have time to be happy. Her legs gave way and she was about to fall to the ground. Higashio Motetsu laughed and shook his head. His long arms scooped her back into his arms. She instantly exploded and wanted to struggle, but she heard him say in a low voice, "Don't move. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what I'll do later." This time, she finally knew her place. After a while, she couldn't take it anymore. Hey, how long are you going to hug me for? Higashio Motetsu looked at her strangely. Wife, isn't it natural for me to hug you? Tao Tao was dumbfounded. When did I become your wife? You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Higashio Motetsu widened his eyes in shock. Wife, you can't be like this. You've already kissed me and touched me. How can you say that? My chastity is gone. Don't tell me you want to abandon me? This time, Tao Tao was finally in a mess. Why did these words sound so familiar? Wasn't this what a woman would say to a man after being molested? Why was it the other way around? She had thought about it earlier. Although he had kissed her, as long as she didn't pursue the matter, he wouldn't be able to do anything to her. She didn't expect that in the end, he would become the weaker party. What kind of joke was this? You're shameless. She jumped out of his arms and glared at him. After a long time, she finally squeezed out this sentence. Higashio Motetsu looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. I don't care. If you don't take responsibility for me, I'll tell everyone that you kissed me, touched me, and even abandoned me. How could this person be so shameless? Tao Tao's face and ears turned red from his words. She glared at him angrily, but couldn't say a word. This person didn't follow the rules at all. Higashio Motetsu looked at her angry look. She was so cute that he wanted to reach out and hug her again. However, at this moment, he felt that something was wrong with his body. Tao Tao also noticed that something was wrong with his expression. Suddenly, he frowned and spat out a mouthful of black blood. Chapter 1728. Tao Tao was shocked. By the time she came back to her senses, she was already holding his hand tightly. What's wrong with you? Are you trying to trick me again? Higashio Motetsu looked at her with a pale face and chuckled. How is that possible? I really cherish my life now. Otherwise, how am I going to grow old with you? She blushed and then turned pale. How can you still laugh at a time like this? She helped him to the bed and then quickly reached out to check his pulse. Looking at his appearance just now, he must have been poisoned. However, when she figured out what he had been poisoned with, she was completely stunned. How did you enter the Devil's Valley just now? After spitting out a mouthful of blood, he felt a little better. Hearing her trembling voice, he could not help but frown. Could it be that this poison was not easy to detoxify? He said, Zimo got the map of the Devil's Valley. I followed the nearest route to enter. Tao Tao said instinctively, so you entered the fog array first, then the garden, and finally the valley? Higashio Motetsu thought carefully. That was indeed the case. Is there a problem? I didn't expect there to be fog here. The terrain is indeed strange. The fog is poisonous. Higashio Motetsu, Tao Tao said, as long as you enter the fog array, the poison will enter your body when the fog comes into contact with your skin. This poison is called pervasive. Higashio Motetsu's expression turned ugly. Thinking of the pity in her eyes when she looked at him just now, he had a bad feeling. What about the garden? The fragrance of the flowers is poisonous. Higashio Motetsu, what kind of strange place was this? There was poison everywhere. Seeing that he did not speak, Tao Tao explained, those flowers look beautiful, but the fragrance of the flowers is extremely poisonous. It's called beauty's fragrance. Higashio Motetsu's expression turned even uglier. He was still thinking that the owner of the Devil's Valley was quite poetic and had so many rare flowers. He did not expect them to be man-eating flowers. What's wrong with the valley? The water is poisonous. Higashio Motetsu, did you touch any water when you came over? There seems to be water vapor when we pass by. This time, it was Tao Tao's turn to be silent. No wonder when she took his pulse just now, there was poison in his body. So there's more than one poison in my body? Even Higashio Motetsu, who was used to seeing great storms, couldn't keep the smile on his face any longer. You should know that the Devil Valley is famous for its poison, yet you still dare to sneak in so brazenly. Now do you understand why I told you not to get close to the Devil Valley? Tao Tao looked at his dark face. She didn't know if it was because of her anger or because of the poison. As expected, this Devil's Valley is extremely perverted. It's not suitable for humans to live in. Higashio Motetsu snorted, then looked at her. Is it difficult to solve? You also know that poisons that can be used to prevent outsiders from invading are not ordinary. Tao Tao didn't answer his question directly. Higashio Motetsu heard this and wasn't too surprised. Instead, he smiled and reached out to hold her hand in his palm. Tao Tao didn't want to be angry with a patient, so she could only let him hold her hand. It doesn't matter if it can't be cured. Anyway, I'll be satisfied as long as I can spend my last moments with you. This sentence, he seemed to be joking, but as long as one looked into his serious and calm eyes, one would know that these words were from the bottom of his heart. Tao Tao felt uncomfortable being stared at by him, and her face was burning. She didn't dare to look into his eyes, so she found another topic to talk about. Generally speaking, after being poisoned by the all-pervasive poison, one will die within a quarter of an hour. Because you took the 100 poison pill I gave you, plus the medicine you took in the past 3 years to nurse your body. Although these are not enough to cure the all-pervasive poison, they can delay the time of the poison's onset. However, you inhaled the beauty's fragrance and came into contact with the water. This is the first time someone was poisoned by these 3 poisons at the same time. These 3 poisons reinforce and counteract each other, so they didn't act up at the same time. If it wasn't because of emotional agitation, the poison wouldn't have acted up at the same time so quickly. What did he mean by emotional agitation? Higashio Motetsu understood. His eyes seemed to fall on her rosy lips, and he said meaningfully, "It can't be helped. With the sweetheart in my arms, it's inevitable that I lose control." She was so serious in her analysis, but she didn't expect him to be so indecent. She glared at him angrily. "You're really shameless?" Higashio Motetsu continued her words with an evil smile. He put her hand to his lips and kissed it, and said even more shamelessly, "I'm already half dead. It's fine if I die under a peony flower." Lud. The back of her hand where he kissed felt numb and itchy. This feeling traveled through her skin and veins to her heart. She couldn't help but shake off his hand. She immediately stood up and said with a red face, "Shut up. From now on, don't talk to me." After saying that, she turned to leave and went to the medicine cabinet to get the medicine. Seeing her red ears before she ran away, Higashio Motetsu smiled triumphantly. Very quickly, Tao Tao found 3 different colored pills and handed them to him along with a cup of water. "Hurry up and take the medicine." Higashio Motetsu looked at the medicine in her hand and didn't move. "Take the medicine. This is the antidote." Tao Tao saw him looking at her silently and not taking the medicine. She was about to go crazy. She couldn't wait to open his mouth and stuff the medicine in. "Hey, say something." Just as she was about to explode in anger, he pointed at his mouth. She instantly deflated, feeling helpless and annoyed. "I told you not to talk, so don't talk. Why are you so obedient? I told you not to go near the Devil's Valley. Why didn't you listen? Why aren't you taking the medicine? Say something." Looking at the angry person, Higashio Motetsu smiled. "If you want me to take the medicine, it's very simple. You just have to agree to go with me." Tao Tao was stunned, then narrowed her eyes. "This is your body. What does it have to do with me? It's up to you to take it or not." Higashio Motetsu smiled. He was just teasing her. But if she could agree, it couldn't be any better. He took the medicine from her hand and took it. His body immediately felt much better. Just now, he was resisting the pain of thousands of ants gnawing on his body and almost broke his cultivation. "Hey, why weren't you worried about the antidote at all?" Tao Tao thought about how he was lying there fearlessly and couldn't help but be curious. "Didn't I answer you just now? As long as I'm by your side, even if I die, I'll be happy." Tao Tao's mouth twitched. "Don't try to coax me with these words that you can fool a 3-year-old child. I want to hear the truth." Higashio Motetsu smiled. "As people of the Devil's Valley, you often come in and out. If there wasn't an antidote, this place would have long become a desolate valley. So that was the case." Tao Tao nodded and asked again, "Then how do you know that I will definitely take out the antidote to save you?" Higashio Motetsu looked at her with a smile like a spring breeze. Because you can't bear to part with me. Chapter 1729. Because you can't bear to part with me. This sentence made Tao Tao's face instantly turn red. How could this person be so shameless as to say such things? It was simply a challenge to her heartbeat. What nonsense are you spouting? After glaring at him for a long time, she finally squeezed out these words from between her teeth. You know very well whether or not someone is spouting nonsense. Higashio Motetsu laughed as he waved at her. Come here. Tao Tao frowned warily. What are you doing? He curled his lips. Afraid that I'll eat you up? Tao Tao chuckled in her heart. When you were taking advantage of me just now, you almost ate me up, didn't you? But she didn't say it out loud. At this moment, although his face had lost its color and was a little pale, it didn't affect that handsome face that angered both humans and gods. His phoenix eyes were slightly raised, and his eyes were sparkling as he laid there casually. Because he was poisoned, his appearance had a trace of illness. But it was this kind of demonic and weak yet seductive look that made her heart waver. In the end, she couldn't resist his gaze and walked over in a bad mood. Just as she walked in front of him, her wrist tightened and a force pulled her forward. She wasn't prepared and was pulled onto the bed by him. She wanted to get up the moment she touched the bed, but his movements were faster than hers. He pressed down on her shoulders and pulled her into his embrace. When the blanket covered her body, everything seemed to have been settled. And she still hadn't regained her senses. How did he suddenly pull her into his embrace? She didn't give up struggling, but she was completely unable to move, all right? This person who was supposed to be weak and sickly was like an octopus, using both his hands and legs to entangle her. Let go of me. She couldn't break free and could only glare at him angrily. Actually, her heart was in a mess at this moment. Her ears were filled with his breath and her body was filled with his scent. It was as if she had been poisoned and her entire body was dizzy. He turned her body around and the two of them faced each other. Their gazes instantly collided. He chuckled, his chest vibrating as he couldn't stop himself from laughing. She turned her gaze to the side. Even without looking, he knew that her face and neck were definitely red. What's so funny? How can you be so shameless? Let go of me, or I'll poison you when I can move. He blew on her neck, and as he wished, he saw a layer of pink covering her fair skin. He smiled triumphantly and said, I can't have a wife if I want my face, so I might as well not have one. Tao Tao rolled her eyes. She didn't know what words to use to describe him. Alright, I won't tease you anymore. I haven't slept for a few days. Let me sleep for a while. Don't move around. He retracted his arm and pulled her into his embrace. He buried his face in her hair and sniffed the fragrance of her hair before closing his eyes in peace. Tao Tao felt that this person was like a puppy, sniffing everywhere and finally settling down in satisfaction as if he had found a bone. She wanted to ask him why he didn't sleep well, but soon she heard his light breathing. She clenched her teeth and shut her mouth. No, why did she care so much about whether he slept well or not? What she should do at this time was to wake him up and disturb him. That would be the best revenge. But she didn't know why she couldn't do it when she saw the dark circles under his eyes. Forget it, forget it. Since her heart had softened a few times, 1 or 2 more times wouldn't make a difference. After a while, she felt that he had fallen asleep. She reached out her hand, wanting to carefully squeeze out of his embrace. However, the moment she moved, the person hugging her immediately tightened his arms and muttered, "Don't move. Be good." The person who had just moved an inch away was once again tightly held in his embrace. Tao Tao wanted to cry but had no tears. But that soft murmur and the action of patting her head made her lose her senses. She pursed her lips, but in the end she couldn't bear to wake him up. She sighed softly and relaxed her body to lean on him. Actually, in order to prepare for the Valley Master competition tomorrow, she hadn't slept well. At this time, his embrace was warm and comfortable. His light breathing was like a lullaby. Her eyelids gradually became heavy and sleepy. She found a comfortable position in his embrace and closed her eyes. Not long after, she also fell asleep. The sunlight shone in through the window and poured down on the two of them. The faint halo was very gentle. And the two of them on the bed had their heads pressed against each other. Their posture was very intimate and they looked very harmonious and warm. The sun slowly set in the west. When the sky was filled with the sunset glow, one of them moved. Her long curly eyelashes trembled and slowly opened. What entered his eyes was the familiar sleeping face. It was incomparably peaceful. It was hard to imagine her being naughty and angry when she was awake. Higashio Motetsu chuckled. He raised his hand to tuck the hair that had fallen on her forehead to the back of her head. Then, he propped up his chin and looked at her. How long had it been since he looked at her like this? Thinking about it, it seemed that he had never looked at her seriously. Thinking about it, he felt a little embarrassed. Every time he thought of something, he felt that he owed her a little more. Little witch, I owe you so much. I'll repay you with the rest of my life, okay? He said softly, but the sleeping person did not hear him. He smiled and kissed her forehead gently. He wanted to stop there, but when he touched her soft skin, he could not help but go down. It landed on her cheeks, the corner of her lips, and finally, he kissed her lips. Tao Tao was awakened by the suffocation. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw that enlarged face that deserved a beating. Even if she used her fingers to think, she knew what this person had done while she was asleep. She was embarrassed and angry. You sneak attacked me. Higashio Motetsu touched her face and chuckled. If you're not happy that I sneak attacked you, then I'll do it openly. With that, he lifted her chin and lowered his head to kiss her. I didn't mean that. When they separated again, the sun moved another inch. Higashio Motetsu looked at the pair of watery eyes in front of him. His heart began to itch again, as if he was addicted. Tao Tao, I'll take you away. He really wanted to tie her to his side and never leave. These words were like a gust of wind, blowing away the charm on Tao Tao's body. I promised Master that I would not betray the Devil Valley. When your poison is cured, I'll send you out. She went from being addicted to being calm in the blink of an eye. This was not what he wanted to see. No, we have to go together. Otherwise, I won't go. He stubbornly hugged her, like a child who could not get candy. No matter what, he had to take his wife away. Otherwise, wouldn't he have come in vain? Tao Tao should have been angry, but seeing his childish side, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. She reached out to push him away. At the same time, a cold and smiling voice came, resounding through the whole courtyard. How dare you? You actually want to take away this senior's favorite disciple. Just as the voice came out, Tao Tao's body stiffened. She had hidden it for so long, but she was still discovered. Chapter 1730. Higashio Motetsu frowned. Although he knew who it was as soon as he heard the voice, he was still very unhappy. It was not easy for him to get along with the little witch in private. Why did this person appear at this time? And from the voice, he knew that the visitor was not kind. At this time, Tao Tao had already broken free from his arms and turned over to get out of bed. He also got up with a frown. At this time, the door opened. There was no wind outside, but a gust of wind with petals blew in. If he hadn't passed by the garden and smelled the fragrance of beauties before, he might have thought that this entrance was very beautiful. However, he had just been poisoned by this flower and felt disgusted. Tao Tao, bring your sweetheart to the flower hall. The person outside the door didn't come in, but it felt like he was everywhere. That arrogant and wanton smile gave people the illusion that he was the only one in the world. As soon as he finished speaking, the wind stopped and the fragrance of beauties filled the ground. Tao Tao's legs were a little weak. She had been a little lucky and casually gave Dongting an identity so that her master wouldn't be suspicious. She didn't expect her master to reveal his identity as soon as she opened her mouth. It was obvious that she had already known. At this time, a person stood in front of her. With a smile in his eyes, he gently caressed her face. Don't worry, I'm here. Tao Tao wanted to tell him that her master was not an easy person to get along with. It could be said that she didn't play by the rules. However, when she saw his clear eyes, as if he knew everything, she couldn't help but purse her lips and nod. At this time, she had no one else to trust except him. In the flower hall. In the past, when she came here at most, there were only her master and a few servants. Now it was full of people. With her master as the center, they spread out on both sides. On the left, there was eldest senior sister Fantasy C, second senior brother Wu Duzi, and third senior brother Enluo. On the right, there was fourth senior sister Piao Gu, fifth senior sister Geisha, and sixth senior brother Jackdaw. There were younger disciples standing on both sides. As soon as Tao Tao and Higashio Motetsu appeared in the parlor, the chattering in the parlor instantly quieted down. However, the silence only lasted for 3 seconds before the chattering resumed. However, this time, most of the chatter revolved around Higashio Motetsu's sudden appearance. Most of the women threw him coquettish glances mixed with disdain and sizing him up. In Higashio Motetsu's eyes, this scene could be compared to the demons and monsters of Yama Palace. None of them were dressed like ordinary people. Some held poisonous scorpions in their hands, some had poisonous snakes coiled around their necks, and some had their faces painted with cobwebs. It was impossible to tell what they looked like. His eyes quickly swept around and found that only Tao Tao, who was beside him, was normal. Tao Tao tugged at his sleeve and said in a low voice, "The one sitting on top is my master." Hearing this, Higashio Motetsu straightened his clothes, then stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Junior Higashio Motetsu greets Senior Magic Doctor. Although this person looked like a demon and was not a kind person, he was still Tao Tao's master, so he bowed respectfully. The magic doctor blew at his newly dyed blue irises on his fingernails and glanced at the person who was bowing. He replied casually, "You are the palace lord of the Moon Palace?" Higashio Motetsu raised his eyebrows. This person had no manners at all. In the pugilistic world, even those who were more senior than him had never spoken to him in such a tone. However, on the way here, he already knew that the magic doctor was a maverick and did things without reason. There was nothing to fuss about. "Yes, I am. I have disturbed you in a hurry this time. If I have offended you in any way, please forgive me." Tao Tao was originally worried that he would not be able to stand her master's way of doing things. She did not expect him to have such an obedient side. Was it because of her? The magic doctor chuckled. "Offended? There are indeed some. Junior would like to hear the details." Higashio Motetsu asked in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. The magic doctor held her chin with one hand and blinked her eyes innocently. She was incomparably pure, which was the complete opposite of her gorgeous attire. "You stepped on many of my flowers and plants when you entered the Devil's Valley. My heart is hurting right now. That is the first reason." The corner of Tao Tao's mouth twitched. Master was acting up again. "Secondly, your eyesight is not good. You actually looked down on this Lord's disciple and caused her to return heartbroken. Just based on these 2 points, this Lord has enough to kill you 100 times. The magic doctor said with a smile. Those who did not know would think that she was joking around with you, but in reality, every sentence was a reason to kill you. "Master, the first reason is not valid. Those are all weeds and flowers and have no value. The second reason is not his fault. I did it willingly. If you are not happy, punish this disciple. Let him go." Tao Tao could already smell the killing intent in her master's laughter. Once her master was in the mood to joke around with someone, it meant that that person's life was over. She could not let Dong Ting stay here any longer. Otherwise, every flower, every blade of grass, and every tree here would be enough to take his life. Higashio Motetsu keenly sensed the gloating expressions of the people in the parlor. He had a bad premonition, but what shocked him even more was what Tao Tao said. "Tao Tao, what nonsense are you spouting? You are a man. If you have a problem, come at me. Stand behind me." He could already feel the killing intent in the parlor. He immediately became vigilant and pulled Tao Tao behind him to protect her. Senior apprentice Sister Fantasy Silk smiled coldly. If our Devil's Valley wants to kill someone, it is extremely easy. Don't make a pointless struggle. Fourth senior apprentice Sister Piao Gu floated around the two and smiled gently at Tao Tao. It is not worth it to lose your life for a man. Come, fourth senior apprentice sister will take you to play. Sixth senior apprentice brother Jackdaw cackled and cupped his hands to the Devil Doctor. Master, why don't you let your disciple end this brat's life? Tao Tao tightly clutched Higashio Motetsu's clothes. Her eyes were slightly wet. She whispered self-reproachfully, I am sorry. When I saw you in the bamboo forest, I should have told you to stay far away. Then you wouldn't have gotten involved. It is my fault. She knew that his martial arts were powerful and that he was omnipotent outside. But here, no matter if your martial arts were the best in the world or had reached perfection, as long as the Devil's Valley wanted your life, you had to stay. At this moment, she was filled with regret. Higashio Motetsu had been paying attention to everyone's behavior. When he suddenly heard her low and hoarse voice, his heart warmed. He took her hand and gently patted her head. Smiling, he said, the one who should be apologizing is me. If I had known my heart earlier, I would not have let you step into this devil's Denver, Dong Ting. Her eyes were hazy with tears. At this moment, the parlor became even more noisy. Yo, there is even a parting of life and death. Where are the melon seeds and fruits? This is the show of the year. Come and watch. It is free. The front row sells melon seeds. The back row sells tea. All of you shut up. You are giving me a headache. The Devil Doctor raised his orchid fingers and pinched the space between his eyebrows. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone turned mute. They rolled their eyes and did not speak. At this moment, Higashio Motetsu said to the Devil Doctor, Senior Devil Doctor, you were wrong just now. Everyone immediately glared at him. Did this brat not want to live anymore? Oh, that's not right. He wasn't going to live anyway. Chapter 1731. The Magic Doctor made an "oh" sound, then raised his eyebrows and looked at him with interest. Let's hear it. Higashio Motetsu turned around and patted the back of her hand, indicating for her to be at ease. Then, he cupped his hands towards the Magic Doctor and said, You said that this junior doesn't like Tao Tao, but that's wrong. Tao Tao is a good girl. This junior likes her very much and doesn't want to let her down. This time, I came to the Devil's Valley to take her away, so the second reason is indeed not valid. Is that so? The Magic Doctor looked at him with interest. But why is the version that this senior heard different? You're not lying to this senior, are you? When she heard him say that he liked her, Tao Tao hesitated for a moment. He wasn't telling the truth, right? And after her master's words, she found a trace of reason. Yes, Dong Ting might have thought of her as a friend. Just like she said, a dog that he had raised for 3 years also had feelings. He probably wasn't used to her not being by his side for a while, so he came out to find her. It wasn't because he liked her. The girl he liked was smart and beautiful. Even if she rode a horse, she wouldn't be able to catch up. Higashio Motetsu had his back to her and faced the Magic Doctor, smiling faintly. What this junior said is the truth. Alright, then let's not count those crimes for now. The Magic Doctor paused here, then continued in high spirits. Then let's talk about your new crimes. He had already prepared for the worst, but he didn't expect this person to not play by the rules. Higashio Motetsu's eyes twitched, but he still cupped his hands and said, Senior, please speak. The sweet smile on the Magic Doctor's face suddenly turned into a demon demanding life. No matter if you like Tao Tao or not, since she has returned to the Devil's Valley, it means that she no longer has the right to choose. You actually want to take her away. That's simply wishful thinking. Do you really think that our Devil's Valley is easy to deal with? When the words fell, the atmosphere in the parlor was as cold as ice. What if this junior insists on taking her away? Higashio Motetsu didn't budge an inch. The Magic Doctor's expression changed, finally settling on a fake smile. Then you have 3 choices: suicide, poison, death. All 3 choices were death. Master, he's talking nonsense. Please be magnanimous and let him out of the valley. I'm willing to bear all the blame. Tao Tao walked past the person in front of him and knelt down. He raised his head and said firmly. Higashio Motetsu looked at the little girl kneeling there, pleading for him. His heart trembled violently in an instant, and his eyes burned with passion. He quickly walked to her side and squatted in front of her. He softly said, Tao Tao, you don't have to do this. Even if I die here, you don't have to kneel down and beg for mercy for me. Get up quickly. Tears welled up in Tao Tao's eyes. She gritted her teeth and shook her head. Don't worry, Dongting. I'm Master's disciple. At most, she'll punish me. She won't hurt me. If you let me beg Master, she'll be soft-hearted and let you go. Higashio Motetsu stared at her until their eyes clearly reflected each other's appearance. Only then did he look away. He lifted his clothes and did something that Tao Tao never expected. He knelt down beside Tao Tao and looked straight at the magic doctor who was sitting at the head of the table, watching the show. He said in a clear voice, Senior Magic Doctor, please give this junior a chance. What does this junior have to do for you to let this junior take Tao Tao away? The moment he opened his mouth, the tears in Tao Tao's eyes finally fell. She covered her mouth and looked at him, crying silently. Higashio Motetsu was famous in the Jianghu when he was young. He was already the palace master of the Moon Palace at such a young age. His elegance was outstanding, and countless women bowed to him. This kind of talented, intelligent, and incomparably proud person bent his knees and lowered his noble head for her. She couldn't believe that he would go to this step for her. He would actually go to this step. Just as she was in a daze, she heard her master's fingers lightly tapping the table. He smiled proudly and said, This is the first time the sect master has knelt to this sovereign. Interesting, interesting. Tao Tao immediately looked at him. He must be very upset to be humiliated like this. The person beside her didn't look at her. Instead, he reached out and held her fingers. He rubbed them comfortingly, indicating that she shouldn't worry. His voice was neither servile nor overbearing as he said, Senior, please give me a chance. Since you've said it so sincerely, then this sovereign will be merciful this once. It's not like I can't give you a chance. The magic doctor's gaze fell on their intertwined hands. His eyes flashed, and he tilted his head and smiled. As long as your luck is good enough. Higashio Motetsu and Tao Tao looked at each other. They didn't know what this person was planning. Then they heard the magic doctor say, Come, bring the things up. Soon, 4 boys came up carrying a large tray. When they got closer, everyone saw that there were 100 porcelain bottles on it. Everyone didn't understand what their master was thinking, but it should be fun. Tao Tao subconsciously felt a sense of crisis. She held his hand tightly and said anxiously, Later, no matter what master says, you can't agree. Tao Tao, don't be nervous. Higashio Motetsu patted the back of her hand. The magic doctor pointed at the 100 porcelain bottles on the ground and said with a smile, These bottles contain the most poisonous poison in the Devil Valley, soul ecstasy. Except for one bottle that contains plain water, there's no poison. Didn't you ask this sovereign to give you a chance? Here, your chance is here. You can pick a bottle from here. Whether you live or die, it's all up to you. If you die, it means that your luck is bad. You can't blame others. If you live, you and Tao Tao can leave the Devil Valley. Everyone's expression changed. It was actually soul ecstasy. It was said that as long as a person touched a drop of it, their entire body would turn into water. The pain was self-evident. They didn't expect that their master would use it to deal with this brat. There was a good show to watch. They hadn't seen the effects of soul ecstasy. This time, they could broaden their horizons. Who knows, it might be helpful for them to make poisons in the future. How about it? Do you dare to accept the challenge? The magic doctor looked at him calmly. His smile was a little scary. Picking one out of 100 bottles, there's still a chance. What if you win? But if you give up, it's fine. You look good, and this sovereign's mood is good. I won't pursue your crime of trespassing into the Devil Valley and let you leave. But there's only one chance. If you can't take Tao Tao away this time, don't think of seeing her again. Tao Tao's lips trembled. As expected, How could her master be so kind? This method was simply too cruel. She walked in front of him and held his hand tightly. She shook her head and said in horror, "Picking one out of 100 bottles is too difficult. You should give up." Higashio Motetsu smiled at her. "Tao Tao, I can promise you anything except for this. If I can't see you, what's the meaning of life? As long as there's a chance, I won't give up the possibility of you staying by my side." After saying that, he firmly pulled her hand away. Chapter 1732. This junior is willing to accept the challenge. When these simple words were spoken, Tao Tao's panic reached its peak. 99 bottles of poison and 1 bottle of plain water, who would have the luck to pick the only bottle? Moreover, it was a gamble with his life. How could she let him take this risk? She walked in front of her master and said in a hoarse voice, "Master, this disciple does not agree with this competition. Please take back your order." The demonic doctor rubbed her head and smiled as he said, "Master can't help you with this, silly disciple, unless he gives up on his own accord." Hearing this, she quickly walked in front of him and blocked his steps. She hugged his hand and gritted her teeth as she shook her head. "Dong Ting, let's not compete, don't take the risk for me. Quickly tell Master that you didn't think clearly and wanted to give up." However, this person also rubbed her head like her master did. With a smile on his face, he reached out his hand and unexpectedly pressed on her acupoint. She was frozen in place. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say a word. She looked at the person in front of her in disbelief. But he understood the words in her eyes and his lips hooked into a smile. "You're too noisy, it will affect my judgment. Be quiet, be good, it'll be fine in a while." Tao Tao gritted her teeth. There were many things she wanted to say, but this bastard had tapped her mute acupuncture point. What should she do? She couldn't just watch him walk to hell. At this time, the servant had already placed the porcelain bottles in front of the two of them. Higashio Motetsu's gaze swept over those bottles and finally landed on Tao Tao. He walked in front of her and the two of them were very close, so close that they could feel each other's breath. His smile was unruly, as if they were meeting for the first time. "Although I said that you have to believe me, there are some things that if I don't say now, I'm afraid that I won't have a chance to say it to you in the future." Tao Tao looked at him in a daze. "Before I met you, my eyes were always on that girl, Qin Yan. At first, it was because I was very curious about her. She was only 10 years old, yet she knew so much about the ways of the world. She was also so cunning, like a little fox. Later on, I approached her with a motive, but I didn't expect her to be so smart and see through it. When I met her again after 5 years, I realized that this little girl had a big place in my heart. After we got back together, I followed her to do business in Jiangnan because I was bored. Gradually, I was attracted by her indomitable spirit, intelligence, and cuteness. However, when I realized that I had fallen in love with her, it was already too late, because she already had a lover. Later, I thought that I should stay by her side, protect her, and give her what she needs. In the end, I did it. I almost lost my life, but I don't regret it." He met her eyes and smiled. "What I don't regret is not that I've done so much for her, but that I met you. Tao Tao, I'm very grateful to God for letting me meet you. You saved my life, but also made my life lively. But I'm very sorry. Because of my ignorance, I neglected you. It wasn't until that rainy day when you decided to leave that I slowly realized what I had lost. When I saw the flowers and plants in the courtyard, I thought of you. When I saw the swing under the grape trellis, I thought of you. When I saw the bustling street, I still thought of you. As long as I closed my eyes, you would appear in my mind and in my dreams. It turns out that in these years, you have replaced Qin Yan in my heart. I have already said goodbye to my past self, and I have also said goodbye to Qin Yan. When I saw Qin Yan that day, I realized that I still have feelings for her. What's left is mostly admiration and affection for my family. So this time, I came to the Devil's Valley to make it clear to you. Please give me a chance. I won't ignore you again, I won't leave you again, and I won't hurt you again. You told me that your true self is not what you show in front of me. I also want to tell you that the me you see is only my true self. Before I met you, although I lived freely, I often felt lonely. I was also cold, and I also yearned for the warmth of my family. So don't worry. No matter what you are the little which I care about the most. It's a pity that I woke up too late. But now that I have the chance to talk to you face to face, I'm already very satisfied. He tilted his head and winked at her with a smile. That kind of unbridled arrogance made the spring breeze unable to help but stop. Tao Tao was so shocked by his words that she couldn't recover for a long time. After digesting those words with great difficulty, she didn't have the time to be happy. She saw a white brocade cloth in his hand. She looked at him, not knowing what he was going to do. Higashio Motetsu raised his hand and touched her face, his eyes filled with tenderness. Tao Tao, I regret that I didn't cherish the time we had together. Now, for a moment, I can't help but want to seize it. After saying that, he laughed at himself. Then he leaned over and kissed her cheek. It was as light as a feather. Tao Tao, my heart is in love with you. She had been looking forward to these words before. She had already given up on the night of the heavy rain. She was already in despair, but she didn't expect to hear it in such a situation. Before she could be happy, she had to face losing it again. God, why are you so cruel? Give me a little hope, and it's immediately extinguished. Make me despair. After saying that, Higashio Motetsu didn't give her time to think. He raised his hand and covered her eyes with the brocade cloth, tying a knot behind her head. So much so that she couldn't see anything clearly before her eyes was a vast expanse of white. Dong Ting, don't go. I already know that the person in your heart is me. I'm already very satisfied. Even if I don't have you to spend the rest of my life alone, with those beautiful memories, I'm not afraid of anything. I don't want anything, I just want you to live. At this time, her eyes were covered and she could only focus on her ears. She heard him walk a few steps and stop. According to the distance just now, he had already walked in front of the porcelain bottle. Then she heard him ask, Senior Magic Doctor, this junior heard that your valley has a medicine that can make people forget their feelings. That's right, it's called love-severing water. This junior has a presumptuous request. If this junior is unlucky and doesn't survive, please give it to Tao Tao. It's approved. Many thanks. Tears rolled out of her eyes drop by drop. Tao Tao's eyes were hazy with tears. She bit her lip until it was dripping with blood. No, I don't want to forget you. In life, I'll accompany you. In death, I'll accompany you. Higashio Motetsu bent down to choose a bottle. The white bottle glowed at his fingertips. He turned around to look at the person beside him. He really wanted to touch her face and hug her again. He sighed slightly and smiled. Then he opened the bottle and drank it. If this is poison, I don't want you to see the cruelest scene. You are the lively warmth that I accidentally let go of. If there is an afterlife, I will definitely meet you early and then tie you to my side, never letting you leave my side. If this isn't poison, then I'll take you home. Chapter 1733. The fate between people was very strange. Sometimes, you thought that the person you met day and night would stay in your world forever. However, when one turned left and the other turned right, they would be lost in the vast sea of people. Sometimes, the person you thought you would never see again would not meet again after brushing shoulders. However, when you turned a corner, the two people would unexpectedly meet again. If you and that person were fated, the heavens would not let you miss each other so easily. So sometimes, it was possible to come back from the jaws of death. When she heard the sound of him drinking, Tao Tao collapsed. When her acupuncture point was unsealed, she fell to the ground. Her hands trembled, but she did not dare to reach out and untie the cloth. She was afraid that once she untied it, that elegant person would no longer be there, only a pool of blood would be left. At this moment, it really felt like a year. At this time, a person walked in front of her, squatted down, and then gently patted her head. The familiar aura, the familiar temperature, and the familiar action made the crying person gradually stop and raise her head in a daze. And at this time, that cloth was taken down. In an instant, there was a bright light. She wanted to see the person in front of her clearly, but her eyes stung. The more she wanted to see, the more she could not see clearly, and the more tears flowed. The book says that women are made of water. I did not believe it at first, but now it seems that it was not a lie. A mocking voice came from above her head. At this moment, her eyes were clear, allowing her to see the face that was more dazzling than the sun. She was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly threw herself at him. "You scared me to death, you scared me to death," she cried loudly in his arms, unable to control herself. Fear, despair, grief, finding what she had lost, joy. Life's joys and sorrows were nothing more than this. Higashio Motetsu hugged her, allowing her to vent her emotions. He had a smile on his face. Coming back from the jaws of death, he did not know if it was his luck that was too good, or... His gaze fell on the main seat, the devil doctor, who was not surprised to see him safe and sound after drinking it. When he picked up the porcelain bottle, her eyes seemed to flash with a trace of praise. At this time, she revealed a bored expression, but she was not angry or shocked. It was as if everything was under her control. At this time, the person in his arms tugged at his sleeve, and he couldn't help but look down. Dongting. Dongting. When he responded for the third time, he suddenly realized that she wasn't calling him for fun. She was really afraid. She was afraid that he was just an illusion in front of her. He reached out to hold her hand and replied softly, "I'm here." Tao Tao hugged his neck tightly and pressed her face against his chest. She closed her eyes. "It's great that you're still alive." He smiled. "Yeah, with you around, everything is fine." At this moment, an untimely voice sounded. "Speaking of which, the two of you, stop being so lovey-dovey in front of me. If you continue like this, I will punish you with the crime of polluting your eyes." The magical doctor narrowed her eyes and looked at them unhappily. If they dared to continue, she really wouldn't be polite. These days, she hated people who showed off their affection at any time and place. It was only then that Tao Tao reacted. She was actually in Dongting's arms in public just now. It was simply too embarrassing. She immediately stood up and lowered her head in embarrassment. The warmth in his arms disappeared in an instant. Higashio Motetsu raised his eyebrows. In any case, she was right in front of him, so there was no need to rush. Thus, he retracted his hand and stood shoulder to shoulder with Tao Tao, facing the person on the main seat. The magical doctor touched her earlobes and rolled her eyes. "Although I didn't want to let you have it easy, it's a pity that you still passed the test." Higashio Motetsu smiled and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Senior Magical Doctor, for your help." The magical doctor looked up and met his eyes. Smart people had a tacit understanding. The magical doctor looked at him deeply, then raised her eyebrows and turned to her disciple. "Ai, what a pity. The cabbage that Master carefully watered and cultivated was actually eaten by a pig. But seeing that this fellow is still considered good-looking, Master will reluctantly let you go." "Thank you, Master." Tao Tao bowed and thanked him. "But Tao Tao, Master will say this first. Last time, you begged Master to let you go. This time he begged Master to let you go. Don't do it more than 3 times. If you come back in the future, Master will not make an exception for you. So don't come back for no reason." After saying this, the magical doctor didn't wait for her reply and had people chase them out, saying that they were an eyesore. Senior Sister Fantasy Silk watched the 2 people disappear through the parlor's door and turned to the person on the main seat. "Master, you went easy on him." The magical doctor rubbed his chin and smiled innocently. How could Master go easy on him? That fellow couldn't have chosen a non-poisonous bottle in such a short time. No matter how good his luck is, it can't be that good. Second senior brother 5 Poison said firmly. Everyone looked at the magical doctor, expressing their doubts. The magical doctor smiled. It was no longer a strange expression, but a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. Those medicines were left behind by the master of the Devil Valley 100 years ago. Because in those years, there would be disciples betraying their master for love, so the devil master thought of a way. If the disciple's sweetheart was willing to take the test and choose one bottle from 100, then they would be set free. It's a pity, ever since this test was born, no one has touched the 100 bottles. It's not that the disciples are obediently staying in the valley and not moved by love, but that no one dared to take the challenge. So after so many years, your 7th junior sister's sweetheart was the first to take the test. So it's like that. But Master, you said so much, then did you go easy on him? The disciples began to struggle with this question again. The magical doctor looked at the curious disciples and raised her jade finger to point outside the window. You haven't forgotten what day it is today, right? Since it's daybreak, then the Devil Valley's master selection will start early. What the hell? Starting the test early because of a disagreement? This disciple still wants to cram at the last minute. In the blink of an eye, the entire parlor was empty. The magical doctor smiled and stood up. She slowly walked towards the pile of porcelain bottles and squatted down without any scruples. She casually picked up a bottle and played with it in her hand. Sighing, she said, "This devil master who wasn't that long ago was really amazing. He was actually able to develop such a good medicine for curing injuries and detoxifying. I heard that he was also a peerless handsome man. It's a pity that he's already dead. If this sovereign was born a few hundred years earlier, perhaps she would have a graceful bearing. That Dong Ting brat looks pretty good. I originally wanted to let him stay to water the Devil Valley, but after thinking about it, I decided not to. That person is smart. If he burned down the Devil Valley, then the loss would outweigh the gain." After the magical doctor talked to herself, she pulled out the cork from the bottle and drank it. She heard that this medicine could also beautify and nourish one's skin. What a pity that brat got lucky. Chapter 1734. Tao Tao never thought that there would be a day when she would leave the Devil's Valley again. Ever since she returned, she was prepared to guard the Devil's Valley for the rest of her life. Now that she was out of the Devil's Valley, she felt as if a lifetime had passed, especially with this person beside her. If it was in the past, she wouldn't even dare to think that they would walk together. Is that bamboo as good-looking as me? A handsome face squeezed into her line of sight, constantly enlarging, bringing with it a sense of jealousy. Tao Tao hurriedly reached out to push him away. Just talk, why are you so close? We've even done intimate things, why would we be afraid of this little bit of distance? Higashio Motetsu rubbed his chin, smiling in a way that made people want to beat him up. Hearing this, Tao Tao's face heated up, and she lifted her leg to step on him. Shameless. Higashio Motetsu easily dodged her shadowless kick, reaching out to touch her waist, and then his arm tightened, pulling her into his embrace. The tip of his nose touched her earlobe, and the corner of his lips hooked up. Wife, your waist is so soft. Higashio Motetsu was such a person. At first, when you weren't familiar with him, he looked incomparably devilish, with a smile at the corner of his mouth that didn't reach his eyes. Once he opened his heart to you, he wouldn't be serious at all. On the other hand, Tao Tao was cold, only in front of him would she act like a normal girl. If she hadn't met him, and then loved the people around him, she might have continued to be cold and indifferent like this. The two of them were too close. Tao Tao's eyebrows twitched, and her face heated up. Why didn't she feel that this person was so shameless before? She pushed him, but he didn't budge. She said unhappily, "Why are you like this? You let a hungry wolf have a taste of sweetness. Of course it's thinking about it. Listen, this person still has the nerve to bring it out." When his breath was getting closer, she suddenly thought of something, and interrupted his movements, reaching out to grab his wrist. "Let me take a look at your body. You haven't cleaned up the remaining poison yesterday, and then you went into the reception pavilion. I don't know if you've encountered any other poison." Higashio Motetsu's phoenix eyes flashed. "Wife, how do you want to see it? Do you want to take off your clothes?" As he spoke, he was already about to undress. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that he was really going to undo his belt. She quickly grabbed his hand, her face flushed red. Hey, I'm just taking your pulse. Hearing this, he slumped against her body and said weakly, Wife, I don't think I'm feeling well. The corners of Tao Tao's mouth twitched. Her acting was so exaggerated. When she touched his wrist just now, she had already taken his pulse. His body was completely fine, okay? Moreover, not only was there no problem, but it was also unbelievably good. Even the aftereffects left behind by the old wounds and poisons had all been cleared up. When she told him about it, he was a little surprised. Then he smiled like a fox. Then I'll take it as a blessing in disguise. Tao Tao didn't understand. He smiled and hugged her waist, his eyes smiling. Your Devil Valley is a strange existence indeed. When he said this, Tao Tao rolled her eyes. If this person didn't want to say it, then he didn't want to say it. What nonsense was this? All right, don't worry about those unimportant things. Higashio Motetsu lowered his head and pressed it against her forehead. His phoenix eyes looked at her seriously, no longer as frivolous as before. Tao Tao, this subordinate didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. You can continue. A voice broke the ambiguous atmosphere in the bamboo forest. Xuanqi Zimo covered his eyes with both hands and secretly opened them a little. Higashio Motetsu cursed in his heart. Continue my ass. His wife had already pushed him away. You came at the right time. He practically squeezed the words out through gritted teeth. Xuanqi Zimo chuckled and immediately retreated behind Tao Tao. The palace lord was so angry that he hid behind the palace lord's wife to avoid disaster. So fierce. He was still so fierce after being caught doing something bad. Tao Tao glared at Higashio Motetsu. Higashio Motetsu rubbed his nose and snorted. He didn't say anything else. Xuanqi Zimo was surprised to find that his palace lord really didn't bother him after Tao Tao glared at him. His palace lord had become a henpecked husband? What happened in the 2 days that he wasn't here? Higashio Motetsu was displeased when he saw this brat staring at his little enchantress. He took out his folding fan and knocked him on the head. His tone was unfriendly. If you have something to say it quickly. Xuanqi Zimo heard what he didn't say. If you don't have anything to say, scram. He didn't want to disturb his masters. He really did have something to say. He immediately took out a letter and handed it over. Palace Lord, this is a letter from the capital. Miss Chu sent someone to deliver it. Higashio Motetsu was stunned. He didn't immediately take it. His gaze subconsciously drifted to the person beside him. Tao Tao didn't notice his gaze. Instead, she urged him to open it quickly. He didn't say anything. He took the letter and opened it. After reading 10 lines at a glance, he looked a little surprised and turned to look at Tao Tao. The latter sensed his gaze and asked doubtfully, What did Qingyan write in the letter? Higashio Motetsu directly handed the letter to her. Xuanqi Zimo was dumbfounded. His palace lord actually allowed Tao Tao to read his letter? And it was Miss Chu's letter. Sharing a letter was such an intimate matter. This meant that their moon palace was about to welcome a palace lord's wife. However, he didn't get to rejoice for long before he saw the future palace lord's wife looking at his palace lord with a faint smile. So, you came to the Devil's Valley to find me for a reason? What you said wasn't true. You just wanted to trick me into helping you save someone? What about me? Do you think I'm blind? This letter was sent last month. Don't tell me you only saw it now. After saying this, she didn't wait for Higashio Motetsu to explain. She stomped her foot down. Who told you to dodge? After that, she snorted coldly and strode forward. Higashio Motetsu looked at the small footprint on his shoe, his heart filled with unspeakable bitterness. He had only seen the letter today. He didn't know that Qingyan had sent the letter to ask Tao Tao to help save someone. As soon as he saw the letter, he knew that things were bad. Tao Tao would definitely misunderstand. This letter really didn't come at the right time. Xuanqi Zimo, who had shrunk his neck, was dragged out by his collar. Tell me, what's going on? Why did you only see the letter now? Xuanqi Zimo felt very wronged. Palace Lord, this letter did arrive last month, but weren't you busy looking for Miss Tao Tao? The subordinates didn't dare to disturb you, so they kept it hidden. It really wasn't on purpose. Higashio Motetsu just remembered that because there hadn't been any news of Tao Tao in the past few months, he had ordered that no matter what happened, they were not to bother him. He hadn't expected that they would trip him up in the end. Can't you be a little more observant? Take it out later. Dongting Wangyun knocked on his head, exasperated at his failure to live up to his expectations. The wife that he had spent so much effort to coax was going to fly away again. Why was the road to wooing her so long? He had to woo her first. Xuanqi Zimo touched his head, wanting to cry. How could he know what was written in the letter? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.